Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another addition to my journey through One Piece. Thank you very much for joining me again. We've got a very big one today, so big in fact that I'm having to divide this arc into multiple parts, into at least two parts. This is Alabasta. This is the Alabasta arc. And I already knew, given the build-up to it, that it would be the biggest arc so far, but I didn't know the extent to how big it would be, and so I've been reliably informed by mods, by chat in general, that it would be a good idea to split this into multiple parts, so this is the first of what I assume will be many arcs that I'll have to cover in multiple videos for one arc. And that's fine. For long-spanning, long-reaching, epic arcs that sprawl all over the place, I think it's just necessary to take your time and divide these videos up, because I don't want it to be a case where there's so much in one arc that cramming it into one video would just make me miss stuff or just gloss over things that I otherwise wouldn't. As you guys know, I have no problems with making long videos or talking for a long time, but there are levels to this, right? If there's a 100 arc chapter and I do it in one video, I'm not going to talk about it for 8 hours or 10 hours, and naturally, that just might be the amount of time I do want to talk about it, who knows? But I'm not going to record a 10-hour video. It's just not going to happen, so that would cause me to gloss over things. So I think this is just the best choice for all involved. It'll be the better experience for you, the better experience for me. I'll be able to keep track of details better, I'll be able to better chronicle my experience, and it'll all around just be the better outcome. So yeah, long ramble aside, this is part 1 of Alabasta. Now what that entails is chapters 155 to chapter 179. 155 to 179. That was a really good cutoff point. That was a great, there was a great sense of it being an interlude of sorts if I just stop right there. For anyone wondering, you can check the chapters themselves, but it was right after the fight with Luffy and Sir Crocodile. It was one chapter after that where the dust kind of settles and everyone is traveling to Alabasta. Everything's congregating, essentially. And it just felt like the perfect spot to end off for the video. I don't know if I'm going to have to make 1 or 2 or 3 more Alabasta videos, we'll see, but this is more than enough for one video. With that out of the way, having said that, the usual stuff. If you would like access to Alabasta Part 2, which is the next video, you can watch the next part, Alabasta Part 2, through early access on Patreon. That's currently available for $5 plus patrons. If you would like to follow these read-throughs live, you can follow me on Twitch, where every Sunday I stream at least a few chapters, and on average every other Friday as well. It's always a great time. Chat is always wild in one way or another, mods are on top of spoilers, and overall it's just tons of fun. And by this point, I imagine I'll have set up my Discord. So if you would like to take part in my Discord server, there's a spoiler chat for One Piece spoilers where you can talk about things like my read-through, how I might react to things, or even nothing involving me. Hell, I'm not that important. If you just want to talk about One Piece in general, the current chapters coming out, or anything else, any other things having to do with anime, video games, sports, whatever, other series, the Discord server should be open right now, so there will be a link to that in the pinned comment and the description. Now to get into the AJP's comments for this video. Just a reminder, these comments were posted in response to the video covering Whiskey Peak, Reverse Mountain, and Little Garden. The first comment is from Dante Crotogini. Sorry about the pronunciation. I think it's interesting that the reason Broggy and Dory started fighting shows Pride in a different light, at least to me, because it's a pretty stupid reason to be fighting for hundreds of years, so I think Oda did a good job in showing Pride as a double-edged blade. It's important, shows your resolve, and all that stuff, but it can also make you do very foolish things. Yeah, I totally agree. That's essentially what I was saying about that theme of this fight, this perpetual fight with the root of which being unknown, and how that applies to Pride. Because, like I said, it's portrayed romantically through people like Luffy or Zoro, through their fights and their bouts and how they look at Pride. But like I said in that video, there's always a counterweight to it. Nami thinks it's stupid, Vivi can't see the logic in it, and Vivi's shown to be very intelligent in quite a few ways. Broggy and Dory have this immense pride, and it's showed to be idealistic for someone like Usopp, for example, or the story in general, but it's also shown to be stupid. Like, it's straight up said, they don't care enough to think about it, and sometimes you need to be thinking about these sorts of things. So I think Pride, and this interpretation of Pride is very multifaceted. In some cases it can be stupid, but worth it regardless of that quote-unquote stupidity. And don't focus too much on my use of the word stupidity, I just mean they don't think it through too much, but sometimes that doesn't matter because of the sentiment behind it. Sometimes pride can be beautiful, but other times you need to rein that in for the sake of whatever, of your plan, your motives, your friends, whatever. So it's very contextual, it's a double-edged sword like you say. Sometimes it can benefit people, sometimes it can harm them, and I think that Oda, in tackling it so far, has been very balanced in doing so, and I appreciate that. Next is from TM, or Time, again, sorry pronunciation. A neat story detail. The reason Don Krieg's crew were starving is that the only escape from the Grand Line is through the Calm Belt. They weren't prepared for the journey because they had to make a hasty escape from Mihawk. That's a lovely detail. I really like that. Don't have much to say about it in general, but it's just so cool, and I'm really glad you pointed it out because it just shows that integration and planning with regards to the world and where certain characters were at certain points of time. And I just love when writers are able to have a full, rich, four-dimensional idea of where their story is at different points in time, and I think bits like this really illustrate that Oda has that vision. So thank you for pointing that out to me. Don Krieg and Baratie having come from the Calm Belt, and that's why he's so hungry. Really nice bit of integration, very smart. Next one is from Renee Boswell, who says, enjoying your thoughts on the series so far. Something to look at going forward is that while each individual arc has its own themes, there tends to be an even broader theme that can be applied to the overarching sagas. So there are threads from Whiskey Peak, Little Garden, and Alabasta that helps tie the self-contained story of the saga together, which then in turn feed into the biggest ideas of the series overall. That's very interesting. It makes sense, and given the thematic approach to the series so far from Oda, it's not surprising. He is very focused on structuring things that contribute to themes in very integrative ways, and nothing ever seems forgotten, at least not so far. Everything seems to be very integrative, so the fact that these sagas in and of themselves have thematic identity, I get it for sure. Now, no promises that I'll be able to pick up on that, especially when I'm doing this sort of bit-by-bit read-through. No promises that I'll be able to make conclusions about thematic identities of whole sagas, but in terms of what we've seen so far, I definitely see broad overarching ideas. Not sure if this is what you're talking about specifically, but the East Blue Saga in particular really feels like that idea of a prologue, of the shifting of power, the shifting of like a pivoting point in history, as we see this unbelievable force of nature of a human being, Luffy, gather like-minded individuals and form a small crew, all of which are linked by their kinship and their dreams, and how they declare themselves ready to take on this grand adventure. And the fervor with which he tackles these challenges, it really just feels like a pivoting point in history as a dream and a pirate king is born figuratively. It feels like the prologue to this story, the stepping into this grand adventure that will shape legend. It just feels like the first steps, which is crazy to say since there is a hell of a self-contained story within East Blue in and of itself and within the arcs. Like, Arlong Park is there, Baratie is there. There's some long-reaching, epic stuff. But nonetheless, it does feel like that shifting momentum of eras of history. Anyway, so that's what I get from East Blue. Not sure if it's what you're referring to specifically, but I see that there. Now with Alabasta so far, obviously it's unfinished, I still have stuff to go, but it definitely seems like stepping into the deep end, for lack of better phrasing. Stepping into the deep end, and our characters slowly understanding the sheer scale of what they're undertaking. There is so much foundation laying through Whiskey Peak and Little Garden and Reverse Mountain. There are so many long-term things that are hinted at and foreshadowed at that will have impact next arc, multiple arcs in the future, who knows. And there is so much detail with the world that is revealed to us about different organizations, about geography and climate, about how the islands and the sea is made up, and how far things scale, that it really feels like, if there's one thing I can say about Alabasta, it would be an expansion, a thematic expansion of the world, of how people's dreams develop. In particular, Luffy begins thinking about things in less simple terms. Usopp as well, his dream is constantly dynamic, for instance. There's just an expansion, thematically, in terms of our character motivations, in terms of the world, in terms of what we view the ceiling of this power to be. At this point, I don't think there is a ceiling. But yeah, so far, East Blue, I'd say, introduction, pivoting point, the shifting momentum of history, a prologue, and, like I said, the caveat is that it's unfinished. I'm not finished Alabasta Saga, but expansion, developing, laying further foundations for future things to come, and setting the stage for what I assume will be the grand crescendo in the future. Who knows, maybe there will be a grand crescendo here. I'm sure there will be in a few ways, but I'm talking about in the context of the entire series. Anyway, I'm rambling. Hopefully there was some value in that answer, and I look forward to seeing some of the themes that span the length of these sagas. The next one is from Salvador Salgado, and this is a bit of a long one, just so you're aware. One of the many things that makes One Piece such a unique existence to me is a theme that you could maybe call heart over reason. Throughout the entire series, we see characters make objectively bad and stupid decisions for the best of reasons, and I think this comes from the series' roots in romanticism. There are many times in life where you'll be presented with a situation that where you'll know that what you're doing is stupid. It makes no sense, it would be smarter to turn the other way and ignore what's happening, but you can't, your heart won't allow it. Even if it helps you survive another day, or in less extreme and exaggerated circumstances, you'll be benefited for it, but you'll do it in deep regret of betraying what you stand for, your dreams and ideals, and of turning your back on those you care about. It is ideals and heart taken to the extreme in the most beautiful of ways, one that makes us connect with it even if it defies all reason and logic. It's something I don't usually hear people point out when talking about the series, but I believe it's one of the most important aspects, one that either makes you a fan for life or pulls you out of the story completely. If you can't vibe with Belle-Mère sacrificing her life because she wasn't capable of renouncing her daughters even if it was a lie, or Zoro not backing down in the face of certain defeat and death because it would break his most sacred vow and promise, then sadly One Piece is probably not for you, which is fine. Not every story is for everyone. But if you're a stupid romantic that bawls his eyes out with those scenes, then One Piece is for you, and I'm really glad you've connected so much with that aspect of the story. I've been a fan of your Hunter x Hunter analysis for a while, and now you're also getting into my other favorite series in the entire world. It's just awesome to see. Thank you very much for the comment. It's usually I wouldn't read out a comment this long, not that it's a whole essay or anything, but just for the nature of time. But it was so good, and I love how it was all phrased, and it touched on a lot of important points that I had to read that out in entirety. First of all, thanks for being a long-time fan of the channel, glad you enjoy the Hunter x Hunter stuff. Heart over reason is one of my favorite themes inherently. Everything depends on execution in the end, at the end of the day, of course. But when it's done well, heart over reason is absolutely beautiful, because in my eyes, there is logic, there is doing things for a reason, you have to be focused, you have to have plans, especially when it comes to life-altering, world-changing circumstances. There has to be logic, and you can't be stupid in certain ways. But I also think that if there isn't a heart to what you're doing, if you become too cold and cynical and pragmatic, then it undercuts the reason of what you're doing this for in the first place. I'm not going to get into spoilers, but people who have seen my videos on, for example, Knuckle from Hunter x Hunter or Leorio from Hunter x Hunter, those are examples of heart over head sort of characters that I really love. Like you say, some people will call that attitude stupid, dumb, objectively undercutting whatever mission you're on for whatever reason. But if you don't have that heart, to me a lot of the beauty of humanity is in that heart, and if you just become completely cold and cut off from that sentimentality, what are you even doing this for? So TLDR, I love that in stories when it's done really well. It's also done in Haikyuu in a lot of ways, and Haikyuu is one of my favorite stories as well. So yeah, like you say, I've been enjoying that part of One Piece a hell of a lot. I don't care if characters are dumb. I don't give a shit if they're dumb, if it's done for good reason, if it's done for sentimental reasons, if it's emotional, if it adds to the themes, or if it contributes in some way to the story. If a character's dumb, I don't care. One Piece has been established from the beginning to be a romantic series, to be very idealistic. This yearning for the improbable dream is arguably the core, in my opinion, theme of the series, or at least one of them. One of the core themes of the series at this point. You cannot have a cutthroat, brutal, pragmatic series when that is one of the main themes. It just doesn't work. And this has been shown from the beginning. Romance Dawn is a literal first arc's name. One Piece is romantic, and so it's going to have characters within it that are just dumb but beautifully dumb. Heart over reason, as you say. And I really like that aspect of the series, and I'm glad it's come across. You know, you mentioned being a fan of the series for life. Who knows if I end up being a fan of the series for life? That remains to be seen. I really hope so. But as it stands, I enjoy it thoroughly, and a big part of my enjoyment is this heart over reason aspect of it, and I really hope that the series never loses that sense of it. You know, I know that there are some people who would look at a story, and if a character is acting illogically, will be frustrated. That isn't me at all. I love when characters do that in One Piece. I love these dumb idiots because they have heart. Gaimon the Tall says, something that I always loved about Whiskey Peak as well as One Piece as a whole is how real it is to the way humanity would operate. One Piece is a fantastical adventure with otherworldly things occurring in it. However, something that I really appreciate is how grounded the world feels. In a world riddled with crime, laid out in the way that the One Piece world is, of course there would be a crime syndicate that tries to pick off hopeful, wide-eyed pirate crews as they gain their sea legs in the Grand Line. It feels almost familiar to our world in a world that is nothing like our own, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's very organic. It's very believable with the context of the series. I think it's entirely logical that there will be, for lack of a better term, rookie crushers who will take advantage of this idealism and optimism as people are so fueled by their sense of adventure as they travel to the Grand Line that they end up making headstrong or emotional mistakes, and people taking advantage of that. That's just how things would happen. That's just believable. I would actually consider it disappointing if something like that wasn't established in the setting. Like, Oda has established pretty clearly, pretty damn early on, that he has a great sense of how things would work with regards to the world. There's so many details scattered throughout the entire One Piece world, and so that's a high standard for him to set. And so with that standard set, I don't know if I would have even noted it, but I do think it would have felt a bit empty if there weren't details like that, given the standard of world building that's been established so far. It just makes sense that there would be people trying to take advantage of pirates like that. It just fits. It felt so natural, and that's why I think it would be unnatural if it wasn't in it, given the breadth of believable details in the world so far. So yeah, I really enjoy that about One Piece, and I hope that continues as we go on. I have no reason to think that it won't. Proto D says, how do you like the incorporation of these silly jokes? Do you think they are just to add to the style of the series, or maybe even elevate it in ways you were not expecting? Anyways, it's great to see your insights into this. It's my favorite story. Hope you enjoy. Thank you very much. With regards to the comedy and the silly comedy, I hope it's come across that I really enjoy it. I think it does add to the overall style of the series, the aesthetic, not just visually, but overall of the series, because One Piece has never taken itself too seriously. It's never been about realism in regards to the art style or the storytelling or anything. It's always been, so far, about being goofy, being silly, having heart, having serious moments, but having that balanced out a lot of the time by silliness, goofiness, humor, fun, not taking itself too seriously. And I think the implementation of humor really adds to that quite a lot. Now, is every joke a winner? Do I laugh out loud at every single gag? No, of course not. Is it the funniest thing I've ever read or experienced? No, but my stream chat can attest to the fact that I laugh pretty often at One Piece. I do chuckle quite a bit, usually with things involving Usopp, sometimes with Luffy. The Zoro stuff in Little Garden was great. Nami being the straight man is wonderful. There's stuff like the Sanji simping. I could do without it. It doesn't really do much for me in terms of humor, and there are misses here and there, of course. Not every joke lands, but not every joke is going to land for every single person. Overall, I like the humor quite a bit, and it does add to the experience. And the last one, which is the most, difficult one, I guess. Ease Chung says, now that you've gone through quite a collection of arcs, especially so by the time this comment is potentially selected, what would be your top 5 arcs across the whole series up until now? I guess I've been offering hints to that along the way to this video, but I guess I've never really said overall what my top 5 would be. So let's do it. Okay, we'll start from number 5. And this is actually, I think, from what I can tell, somewhat of an unpopular choice, but it shouldn't be surprising at all if you've watched my videos. Number 5 would be Syrup Village. Even till now, Syrup Village is in my top 5. I very much like Syrup Village a lot. You can go to that video. I was speaking in glowing terms about it a lot, and I love that all it does for Usopp. I think up until this point, it's one of the most thematically cohesive arcs in the series up until now. It is genuinely beautiful how Syrup Village comes together in the last couple of chapters as a culmination of Usopp and lies, and the idea of those beautiful lies and storytelling, and his specific dream. Does it have the most interesting antagonist? No. Is it the richest and most efficient arc? No. It definitely isn't the most interesting in the middle when we have those cat cosplayers. What were they called? Whatever they were called. You know what I'm talking about. But I think the beginning's very strong. I think the middle does what it needs to do, and then it comes together so beautifully at the end. And like I said, what is the most thematically cohesive conclusions to an arc in One Piece so far? Sierra Village is still right up there. It's still very good, and to me it gets better the more time goes by. Usopp's just gone from strength to strength. As you guys know, I'm a huge fan of him. And that is established in Sierra Village. It's a great introduction for Usopp. And yeah, it's my number 5. I think that's the longest explanation I'll have for one of these rankings, but yeah, I felt like gushing a little bit for Sierra Village because I am one of its biggest defenders for sure. Number 4 would be Logtown. Just super efficient, super rich. I enjoyed it so much. I love all that it did with regards to pivoting the story and transitioning and doing a lot of functional things while just giving us these legendary moments. Luffy laughing, introducing characters like Smoker, and then just being so grand and epic while also not being too bloated and just getting you so hyped for the arcs to come. Logtown was a beautiful, functional, mechanical arc, and I really like it a lot. Number 3 would be Baratie. Sanji's backstory and Mihawk vs. Zoro remain to this day 2 of the peak story moments, whatever you want to call them, of One Piece. And Baratie in general does a lot of great things with dreams and food and connecting with people and that kinship and the idea of freedom and living for yourself. It's so great for Sanji, and just in general, yeah, it's a top 3 arc at this point in time. And a little bit of a cop-out, at this moment, I don't really know whether I like Arlong Park or Drum Island better. It's tough. It's really tough. Arlong Park has the better antagonist, but Drum Island has the overall more powerful thematic cohesive package. They both have deeply emotional moments. They really just, Arlong Park does some special things with Nami and really just made you care for her so much, but the specific backstory for Chopper and his connection with Hiruluk and what it has to do with perception and heart and the bits of governmental, political themes that are tackled there, it's so good. So each arc has different strengths, and I'm gonna have to do some soul searching about which I prefer, but those would be my number 1 and 2, Drum Island and Arlong Park in some order. Now, I imagine Alabasta will make it into my top 5. I think that's a given, but I didn't include it because I'm not done the arc. So yeah, those were the AJP's comments. Sorry, I think they went on longer than usual this time, but a lot of them were really good or had the potential for long answers, so you guys know me, I talk a lot. Thank you very much for sending in your questions as always, and if you'd like them to be read in a future video, of course, just be sure to include the hashtag in your comment. So, Alabasta. Wow, like how do you start off? This arc has had the biggest build-up of any of the arcs so far. There's been the most plot points and the most characters hinging on this culmination. Like, it is a culmination of an arc in a lot of ways, and it's been the arc that has the most build-up by far. By far, like, bar none. It's no competition. There are so many characters that we're here to meet or see why they're here and how things will come about, and there's so many continuous plot lines that will coalesce at Alabasta. Vivi's in particular is the prominent one, but there's all these things with Baroque Works, there's Ace, there's Smoker and what the Navy are doing, there is the crew and why they're even doing this in the first place. There's all sorts of things here, and it all culminates in Alabasta, so there's a lot weighing on this arc, and I have high expectations, or I had high expectations and continue to have high expectations, not because of what people have told me about the arc. Like I said, I don't let people's hype really cloud my judgment or expectations for things like that. But I have high expectations about this because Oda himself, in my opinion, fueled high expectations for Alabasta. So far, it hasn't disappointed at all. So far, it's been extremely rich, very emotional, it's expanded and followed through with a lot of the threads that it's established before. The payoff on some of the seeds that were planted is immense. There's been great character work for existing characters, Vivi, and there's been great stuff for new characters introduced, or characters that have hardly been introduced that get more substantiated here. Like I've kind of alluded to in the AJP's comments, this saga as a whole, Alabasta, has been all about expansion. It really opens up the scope of One Piece. We get to see bits of extra lore, whether it be due to the currents, the climates of the different islands. We learn about the log pose and the eternal log pose, the giants on Little Garden. We have lore bits like the Will of D. We learn about Whitebeard's pirates, Blackbeard. We learn about the enemy faction Baroque works and their ranks and how they're what their dream is and how they're structured, which we'll get into. The stuff with Whiskey Peak and how they do their rookie crushing thing. And so yeah, Alabasta has been expanding all sorts of things. And they all converge here, and here is where a lot of that begins to pay off, while also expanding things more and laying more future seeds for more future stuff, but it doesn't feel like too much right now. Now, to be completely upfront, there is a little bit of a concern in my mind that things could potentially buckle under too much. You know, the world expanding continuously and there being more and more characters in the story as a whole, perfect, great, fine, that's totally good. It enriches the world, and I love that. But for individual arcs, I do like there to be a bit of a focus, you know? It's why I'm a fan of, for example, minor Hunter x Hunter spoilers, of Hisoka not being in Chimera Ant, for example, of Kurapika and Leorio not being in Chimera Ant. There would have been too much there. But yeah, I'm in a bit of a rambly mood, I guess. That is just something that plays a factor on my mind, and nonetheless, I have encouragement that Oda knows what he's doing, and not a huge fear, but just something I think about. But yeah, Alabasta carries through on all the stuff that was established, and it has great character work, it has great themes. In terms of the character work, Vivi is amazing. I love Vivi. There's some great stuff for Sir Crocodile, there's some nice stuff for, and I can say it now, Robin. Some nice little hints here and there. Not fully substantiated, but nice hooks for her. Luffy had some great stuff, of course. All the crew get some nice stuff throughout, but specifically Luffy. It's nice to see Chopper having agency and utility. And Smoker gets some great stuff. I love that Oda's followed through with the promise that his character showed. Ace is really interesting, and I love how he's used in this arc. Toto's a very solid minor character. Koza, I like Koza a hell of a lot. So the character work is really good so far. And then in terms of the themes, there's so much here. It is so rich. There's, we dipped into politics in Drum Island and leadership, and that was a primary theme of Drum Island, like I said. And it talked about the world government, and so in terms of the structure of the world, it definitely dipped its toes into it. But Alabasta just takes it that step further with regards to politics. I obviously can't make conclusions about the arc as a whole, since this is obviously just part 1 of my Alabasta review, but there are lots of ideas introduced here about, potentially the blurred line of morality. Maybe, I'm not sure if that'll follow through, but that's something I thought of at the beginning. Just in general, the politics and how things are structured here, and, quote-unquote good guys on the bad side. Those are simplified terms. It's way more gray than that, but just to simplify things, Smoker Tashigi with the Navy, for example, and then quote-unquote bad guys working with the government, for instance. I'm not saying that the government are good guys, of course, but you know what I mean. Sir Croc, he's a man of the people, as established early on, and so that's just very interesting. There are some blurred lines and blurred allegiances here that was really enticing right off the bat. There's the theme of leaning on others, that was introduced and carried through in Drum Island, but that continues to be a factor here, and I'm a big fan of that. The idea of whether you be a leader, a ruler, just a random, regular person, leaning on others. Everyone needs other people to connect with and confide in, and to support them. And another theme that I'll talk about in this first portion of Alabasta is idealism, its application to leaders, whether it is contradicted by or complemented by realism, the value of idealism, being overly optimistic and hoping for something that may seem unrealistic in these big, large-scale political situations. I think that's a pretty prominent theme here, as explored through Vivi, Luffy, Cobra, the overall conflict. It's really well done. This arc also does that thing of camaraderie between the Straw Hats. We have quite a crew now. We have, I think, 8 people: Luffy, Usopp, Zoro, Nami, Sanji, Chopper, Vivi, Karu. I count Karu. So we've got a crew of 8 now, and it's just lovely to see them all interact and fight for one another, and there are funny moments, there are heartwarming moments, there are nice little interactions in the corners of the panels that really help enrich things and just make you chuckle here and there, or make you go, "Aw," here and there. This arc really follows through with this collection of people being there for one another and having these very, very real, very true, strong connections. And you really engross yourself in that. You feel a part of that. It's quite beautiful. Now, with regards to the cover stories, we have Django's Continuing. This is the best cover story, definitely. So basically, the Django stuff continues. Eureka takes a hostage. They nearly win, but then Django strikes back with full body. There's this big conflict between Django and the Marines and all these things that are happening. Captain Eureka is laid out, he's defeated, and Full Body and Django work together. Then by the end of it, Django has to hypnotize Full Body to make him forget about him, and goodness gracious, that made me emotional. I couldn't believe that a cover story had made me emotional. I couldn't believe that Django had made me emotional, but it did. The cover story of Django hypnotizing Full Body to forget all about him, you understand why it was necessary for a bunch of reasons, obviously, but nonetheless, it was very emotional to see. They had gone through quite a lot together, and they had become friends, and for him to be forced to get him to forget him, that is very sad, and I think this is a great illustration of the optimal outcome or the utility of these cover stories, because this leads to something genuinely emotional. There's a story here, a complete, full, beginning to end story for a minor character that I thought was funny, but not super substantial. This substantiates him more, and Full Body as well, and it elevated both characters, and so eventually in the end, the unlikeliest of stories, Django ultimately gets pardoned for his piracy and seems to join the Marines. So, hell yeah, great cover story, definitely my favorite so far. And also, worth noting that in the midst of him hypnotizing Full Body, they get interrupted because some beautiful woman walks by. Not sure if she's going to end up being a factor later on, but thank you, beautiful woman. Thank you so much for interrupting that. And, yeah, again, beautiful series of cover stories. But yeah, to start off the arc properly, we have Sir Croc. We start with Sir Croc, who seems to be a hero in Alabasta. He's a hero of the people, like I mentioned earlier. There are pirates taking over the town of Nanohana. As Robin said earlier on, during times of political strife or discord or problems, that is ripe territory for pirates to overtake. So there are pirates here, and Sir Croc has to go out to set things straight. So he just makes short work of all the pirates who are here, who are creating this conflict, and once again, hero of the people. There are some great illustrations throughout of, I think, just the extent of the war zone. There might have been some nice illustrations of people cheering for Sir Crocodile, if I'm not mistaken. It was just very effective presentation for the extent to which he is a hero and the extent to which he is so strong, which is great establishment for him because he's clearly the big bad, right? He's established as the big bad for this. So what could that mean for Vivi, who's trying to regain control here, for Luffy's crew and the obstacles they might have to confront in trying to confront him? It's just really interesting. Also, a little bit of a correction. I talked about how he had an $80 million bounty, or berry bounty, in my Whiskey Peak video. That is just prior to him becoming a warlord. The bounty for Sir Crocodile was 80 million, but it was frozen because he became a man of the government, and so obviously that just became dismissed. So that was his bounty before he joined in and became a warlord. So just a little correction there. But worth noting that I love Sir Crocodile's character design. I think it's very traditionally pirate. And it was pointed out to me in chat that he was the second traditional pirate character design. After Zeph with the peg leg, he now has the hook, so it's just cool. And he just exudes authority and malevolence. And he's very strong. He's stabbed by like 10 dudes, and you're wondering how the hell he's able to survive that, because he just shrugs them off and kills them all. We now know it's because of his powers, but in the moment, it's a great bit of intrigue, and there are interesting looks from him, interesting expressions from him after he does this and fights off these pirates. It almost felt like pity. I don't think it is, but it almost felt like pity for just how weak they truly are. There was also just a great amount of disillusionment and disinterest in his eyes, like, it was hardly even a challenge. What am I even doing here? Heavy lies the crown sort of thing. So that's what I got from those sorts of expressions that I thought were very effective. And then we cut to Vivi's father, Cobra, who, after learning about how Sir Crocodile disposed of all these pirates, says, "I know about Sir Crocodile, but we are indebted to him." And that really establishes that this could really be politically dense and very morally blurred. That's where I first got these ideas of blurred lines of morality here and what certain figures of leadership will have to acquiesce to. But then after that introduction, we cut to the Straw Hats, where there's just general fun Straw Hat hijinks and humor. They're fishing. There's really cute interactions all over the place. We're then shown a nice little handy-dandy chart about the structure and ranks of Baroque works, where it's shown that all the females in Baroque works are named after holidays or days, and all the males are named after numbers. So a nice little bit of integration that Mr. Tu Bon Clay is named after both a holiday and a number to show his gender fluidity, which I think is just generally really cool. And it's nice to see how things are laid out in terms of those ranks. It's natural that Vivi would be able to tell the crew about this, and it is just nice to set the stage for what they're going to be confronting, and I appreciated that it was laid out for us in this way. And all of these people will be congregating at Alabasta, so it just builds more and more hype for what's to come. We get some nice little world-building details about these undersea volcanoes that will rise again in a few thousand years, just nice little touches here and there. I always gotta comment on the geography bits, because I really do enjoy them. Little detail, but I liked it. And so the crew continues to fish, and they end up catching Mr. Tu Bon Clay, and it's established here that he has eaten a devil fruit, the clone fruit, which allows him to look and sound like anyone he touches with his right hand. I think he has to touch their face with his right hand, and he will imbue that memory into himself and be able to change and transform into that person at any time. This is again a nice little detail to show his gender fluid cohesion. There is a fluidity to his gender identity, and so it makes tons of sense. There's an integration here that he can transform into anyone he touches in this way. It's just a nice integration between personality and psychology and characterization and power, which I enjoy a lot. We've seen bits of that with Luffy, a couple of other characters as well, so I like to see how that continues to play a factor. I really like when power systems are able to reflect the personalities of their users, and this is a clever way of demonstrating that. In general, Mr. Tu Bon Clay here is shown to be very flamboyant and fun. He feels very unantagonistic. He doesn't feel like he's one of the big bads that they're going to be, like in a high rank too, that they're going to be taking on later on. That ended up being subverted a little bit later on, but in this moment, he definitely doesn't feel super antagonistic, and he just feels very fun. And what's key here is he's kind of chewing the fat with the crew, and while he's doing this, like, they all think he's really cool, and in demonstrating this power, he changes to a bunch of different faces, and he shows Vivi's dad. And Vivi makes note of this, and this is very key. And he's about to leave after this, and he says this grand declaration: friendship is not determined by how much time you spend together. And Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper all adore Mr. Tu Bon Clay, and it's just generally good vibes all over the place. But I like that quote: friendship is not determined by how much time you spend together. We will see later on, I'm not sure if it'll end up playing a factor in Mr. Tu Bon Clay's characterization or psychology or anything, but it definitely plays a factor with regards to the crew. Found family, blood not being a factor for their connections, and them just being so tied together through their dreams and kinship that they have these strong connections that supersede the amount of time they spend together, which I really like that. It's literally illustrated by Mr. Tu Bon Clay here to show that, to some extent at least, he has some commonalities with the crew in philosophy. After he leaves, Vivi talks about seeing her dad, Mr. Tu Bon Clay, turn into her dad, and it's a little ominous. There are so many ways in which this could implicate the plot, and so after seeing this part, I was really on the lookout for times in which characters doing slightly off things could have been Mr. Tu Bon Clay, and that definitely ended up being a factor. But it's interesting, again, that Vivi in this moment couldn't even tell that he was a quote-unquote bad guy, such as his characterization. Then there's some nice little bits of the crew. Luffy eats a lot of stuff because he's starving, which ends up actually playing a bit of a role later on. We have introduction of the sea cat, which is an animal characteristic that's kind of a trademark of Alabasta. Nice little bit of world building as well, and that shows that they're close to Alabasta as they're voyaging on. And we have Usopp continuing to tell tall tales about his exploits, but now he has someone who's a more willing audience than any of the other members of the crew in Chopper, who's like, wow, so engaged and enraptured with Usopp's stories that it's really sweet, it's really cute. I'm glad that Usopp now has an audience and someone who is so invested in this. And piggybacking onto the idea of Mr. Tu Bon Clay being potentially their antagonist, their adversary here, Zoro has a really great plan, showing his brains here. He's not just a mindless oaf who can only fight, and, he's brainless and whatever. I talked in Logtown and some bits throughout Little Garden and I think Whiskey Peak too, about how he just has this charisma that inspires others in a lot of different ways. And he's also very smart too, he's very intelligent. There's more to him than just brawn. And here he has a great plan. You know, someone who can turn himself into other people, essentially a doppelganger. So what their plan ends up being is that they have a band tied around each of their arms. And to jump ahead a little bit, what's key isn't actually the band itself, because that's an outward thing. What's key is that they also have a symbol underneath that band that signifies more than anything that they are one of the true, real members of the Straw Hats. So very intelligent plan to combat a potential obstacle from Mr. Tubonclay. And there's a great spread as they all put their arms in. There's Kadu as well with the wing. It's very cute, and it really feels like a fellowship. It just feels everyone is a part of something greater than themselves. This family, this home, these bonds, these ties, and it's a beautiful moment of, like I say, fellowship as they set out for this extremely dangerous adventure. And just get ready, throughout these Alabasta videos, I'm just going to be gushing about Vivi. I love her. There's a lovely little moment here as she, after putting their hands in, she looks at her band and just beams, just smiles at so much at having her identity and her heart, having a place, having a home in the crew. It's beautiful, from starting as someone who was on the outside looking in, not really being able to buy into these people or just being there for utility and being open to betraying them potentially, to being a bona fide member of the crew who would live and die for them. I truly believe that she would risk life and limb for them at this point. They certainly would for her, and I just love seeing her beam. Just looking at this, such a beautiful expression of happiness at having found this family. Regardless of what happens in this arc, I don't think Vivi will die here. I think it's a distinct possibility that she could potentially be established as the queen or princess of Alabasta again, and maybe the crew has to leave her at Alabasta. Not sure, but either way, I think she will be an enduring, permanent, consistent member of the crew, even if after Alabasta she isn't with them physically. I think her legacy and her place in the crew will be completely permanent. She'll always be a member, just through the way she's developed her bonds with them. And Kadu as well. Kadu genuinely has a place in the crew and does so much for them and for Vivi, and lots of great bonds with Kadu too. We learn that Smoker is in Nanohana, having gone to Alabasta to head off the crew, and they get word of someone who dropped dead after eating a poisonous spider called the Desert Strawberry, I think it is. And they discover this person in a bar, or a restaurant or something, and this person ends up being Ace. Now, speaking of future plotlines and laying seeds for future foundations, Drum Island did this with Ace through the hints right at the end of the arc about him, and here he is again, just continuing on, staggering these plotlines throughout arcs to give it a very organic, rich, full feel to the story, as things consistently are moving forward, as things are consistently being integrated and introduced. I didn't mention that about Ace and this being introduced early on as a great hook, because I was just so hyped talking about him, talking about his introduction. But yeah, it's definitely a factor here. He has a great character design, and obviously I know who he is with regards to Luffy, but it is striking that he does look like Luffy. He's generally aloof, very funny, he eats a lot, and through Smoker's dialogue, as he confronts him a little bit, he reveals that Ace is Whitebeard's 2nd Division commander. Now, we haven't been introduced to Whitebeard, we've only heard of him, but it continues to build a bit of an aura around Whitebeard, being in control, or the commanding officer, whatever, authority, to Ace, who is such an impressive person in and of himself. And it's revealed here his name is Portgas D. Ace, the Will of D, the 3rd person. Now, it's been introduced and established that people with the Will of D have this, what seems like an ability to be this force of nature in a way that just sweeps people up and leads things into new ages of piracy. At least that was the case with Goldie Roger, and Luffy. The Will of D seems to be imbued in people who are larger than life, who other people just love to follow for one reason or another, with this infectious pirate spirit. That's what I've gotten from it. You know, there's more to it. I talked more about it in my Drum Island video, what I could be hypothesizing about, but essentially that's what it comes down to. There is this unbelievable force of will that seems to characterize people with the Will of D, this D in the middle of their name. And it's interesting that Ace has it too. He definitely seems to be that sort of personality. And what's funny is that in recounting the Will of D stuff, I was going, okay, on stream, I was going, okay, so there's Gold D. Roger, Monkey D. Luffy, Ace D. Luffy. I accidentally said Ace D. Luffy instead of Portgas D. Ace. It was kind of funny. But it's revealed that he is Luffy's brother. That's why he was looking for Luffy. He is his brother. And at the same time, Luffy, starving, is charging for the restaurant that this is happening in. So what is going on with the Will of D? All the questions I posed at the end of Drum Island just expanded upon even more, because it applies to Ace now. What is this actual will? We are seeing definite, distinct overlap in the overall aura of these characters who have the Will of D, in their leadership, their spirit, their sense of adventure or conquest or whatever you want to call it. We'll see what it leads to, but more and more gets added to this, and I love it. The others chase after Luffy as he looks for this restaurant, and they're able to see that Mr. 3's ship is docked at Alabasta. So the mystery of Mr. 3, he's apparently at Alabasta, and they see this, which is a bit concerning after what happened at Little Garden. And then there's a bit of a standoff between Smoker and Ace. Ace is waiting for Luffy, and Smoker says as long as he's Navy, and as long as Ace is a pirate, he cannot let him go. Again, an allusion to Smoker's mysterious, interesting resolve and sense of justice and need to punish pirates. It is very powerful, and it continues to be a factor here. And then Ace kind of grins and just goes, we just won't be able to get along. Just a very interesting clash of opposing personalities, and I love both of their roles in this standoff. Luffy then crashes into the restaurant, and Smoker wants to get at him, but Luffy just runs away really quickly because of Smoker before Ace can even do anything. And Luffy remembers, oh crap, my attacks won't work on Smoker because of his smoke nature and all of that. And it got me to thinking. I don't have any conclusions to make about this concretely, but Smoker being invulnerable to the vast majority of attacks from Luffy and just people in general, but Luffy in particular, makes me think about him as a character and how he could thematically antithesize Luffy and the crew. I think I need to know a bit more about his characterization. Not sure if there will be a backstory for him, but it just makes me think, because Oda does put thought into the powers and how they can indirectly characterize or do some storytelling things about the characters. And I wonder if Smoker being so invulnerable and such a contrast in this way to the powers of the pirates we've gotten to know, does that say something about him? The nature of Smoke, this ephemeral nature, the way he's able to dodge them or the way he avoids them in certain ways, does that say something about him? Not sure, but it's some thought food. In the meantime, Tashigi mobilizes her troops to try and find Luffy now that they've got the man they were looking for on the island, and all this starts ensuing. In the meantime, the rest of the crew don't know where Luffy's at, so to disguise themselves and blend in, they dress up with the local sort of fashion. Nami and Vivi are dressed up by Sanji, so they're wearing belly dancer outfits. They look far better than everyone else, who all look kinda fishy. They look like thieves. Sanji does his simping, not much to say about that. And an interesting bit of foreshadowing that ended up being a factor to the plot later is that Chopper is sensitive to the perfumes that Nami is wearing, and that would be a factor later on. A pretty big factor. Sorry about the shirt change. I got interrupted and had to start recording on a different day. Anyways, continuing on. So the plan for the Straw Hats was essentially to find the rebel base in a place called Yuba. So they're talking about how they're going to go about that. During that time, Luffy comes up and he's in trouble and he's being chased by Marines, and he goes, "Hey you guys," and incriminates them in a very humorous scene, and it was great. And in the midst of all this, Smoker tries to catch Luffy with his smoke powers, and then Ace comes up and starts kind of defending Luffy a little bit and goes, "You're smoke, I'm fire," and defends Luffy essentially, and Luffy recognizes him as his brother. Apparently it's been quite a while. We then cut away and we see that Mr. 11 is being held captive by Billions. Billions add a little bit to the ranking system or structure of Baroque works, saying that they're people in contention to become numbers. And they've captured Mr. 11, they want to usurp him a little bit, so that's just a little bit of the political dynamics within the ranking system of Baroque works. Some nice details there. So the crew are running away, still from the Marines, and Ace essentially says that what he'll do is he'll take care of the Navy to allow Luffy to escape. Vivi at the same time gives Kadu information in a letter to send to her father and his royal attendants and trusted confidants to tell him about all the situation that's going on with Baroque works, with her, what she's found out, everything. So she's sending this information through Kadu to her father, and so Kadu leaves and goes to Cobra. And the line here that struck me the most was, tell father, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it was essentially tell father that there is still hope for this kingdom, which I thought was really lovely. So Ace decides to go and do his thing. Luffy then tells the crew a little bit of background information, which is that Ace is 3 years older than Luffy. He is also a pirate, and he's also after the One Piece. Now, is that part of the parallels for the people with the Will of D? Potentially. That definitely keys in with that otherworldly sense of drive that seems to possess Goldie, Roger, and Luffy. So, could be a factor. And he left the island 3 years earlier. So he left the island, I guess, at the same age that Luffy left the island. He's very tough, and he also ate a devil fruit. So lots of parallels between him and Luffy. There are more similarities to them than just appearance. So Ace then shows up again, and he asks Luffy, or them in general, but Luffy specifically, to join Whitebeard's pirates. And what's hilarious about this is, I think I just had to turn the page or something to see what Luffy's answer was, but I'm just going, there's no way Luffy would ever do that. We know how he feels about carrying out his own will and going out on his own journey, with what he said to Robin earlier on, right? About not wanting to be influenced by other factors, even if they help them. And so there was no way that Luffy was ever going to join Whitebeard's crew. But Ace here says Whitebeard is the greatest pirate he's ever known, and he wants to help him. He wants to help him become king of the pirates. That's very interesting, because it builds up an aura around Whitebeard now. Little bits of integrative information that we get about this Whitebeard character, that someone as impressive as Ace, for him to look up to him in this way, he must be a super impressive individual. But yeah, Luffy ends up answering him, and he just goes straight up, no, I'm not going to join your crew. Ace laughs. He knows Luffy, he's his brother, he knew he would never do it, but he goes, I figure I'd ask anyway. But then it's basically said here, they're gonna need to fight each other or come in conflict, because their ideas of who needs to be the pirate king completely contradict one another. Don't know if that'll ever come to pass. I think it's too early to make any conclusions about that, but it's an interesting dynamic between the two of them already. It's immediately effective, efficient, and powerful. We then learn that Mr. 11 died as a result of the Billions capturing him. They killed him. And at the same time, we then go back to the Navy, who are regrouping after their conflict with Luffy and then Ace. And Smoker mentions some interesting things. He says that he hates all the warlords. Why specifically? There could be just a very straightforward answer to it. It could just be an ideological conflict between what they stand for and what he stands for, and him just disagreeing with the concept and not trusting people who were pirates. But I don't know. I just want to know more about Smoker and why why he thinks the way he does. Why does he have this stance towards pirates, and how does that lead to his thoughts about the warlords? I don't know. I just want to know more, and I really hope there's more out there. I think there is. I think there has to be, because we're seeing a lot of manifestations of what has happened to Smoker in the past, I'm sure, or why he thinks the way he does. But we're not really digging underneath that, and yet there are hints about things underneath that, so I really want to know what's going on in Smoker's mind. Smoker then talks about Vivi. He notices that she's with the group, and he goes, I don't know why she would be with them, and I don't know why Sir Crocodile's working with the government. It doesn't fit with his MO, or his personality, or psychology from what I know about him. And that just plants in your mind the idea that this is an ulterior motive, or that Sir Crocodile's role is laced with ulterior motives, which is something that we would have understood before, I'm sure, through just his characterization and role, but nice to have it confirmed from the point of view of another character. Ace is continuing to talk to Luffy and company, but particularly Luffy, and he says, he hands him a piece of paper, and he says, this paper will bring us back together, or bring you back to me, or something along those lines. Interesting. And then he thanks Luffy's crew for taking care of his little brother in the way that they have, because Luffy is a handful. He would know better than anyone, I guess. And I think that shows a very caring, elderly brother nature to Ace, something that's quite nurturing, very compassionate, very heartfelt, which is a nice touch to him. And then he talks more about why he was on, or what he was doing in general. We know he was on Blackbeard's tail because of what was said in Drum Island. He was looking for him, and he explains why here. He says he was on Blackbeard's tail because Blackbeard killed a shipmate and jumped ship, which is obviously looked down upon to a great degree. That's why he's here. That's why he was at Drum Island before, for Luffy as well, but also for Blackbeard, and that's why he's here now. He's on his trail. And so he has to go, and he says that the next time he'll see Luffy will be on the high seas. And there's a very serious look from Ace as he goes away, as he departs. It's just a very subtle but very deeply serious expression on his face that is in large contrast to the aloof nature we've seen from him before, and that really just interests me in what's going on with him and what his role could be in the future. And he makes a big getaway from the Billions. He had done his thing with the Navy earlier, so he's just not popular with a lot of these factions. He's very chaotic in a way, and I'm a big fan of all that. And what's interesting is there's this paper, this paper, what could it mean, what could it represent? I'm sure it'll have tons of importance down the line, but it's interesting that it's just a scrap of paper, that's all that's said about it. Without context, it's essentially meaningless, but because Ace gave it to Luffy, Luffy wanted it. Luffy said, no, I do want this. So he ascribed value to it because it was something that Ace gave to him, which I think is a subtle way of showing that Luffy deeply respects Ace. I mean, we could see his respect for him in other ways as well, but I think this is a nice sort of underlying way of showing it as well. And like he said about it, hang on to it always. That will bring us together again. And so he surfs away on a surfboard that runs on flames. It destroys the Billions who are pursuing him. He's extremely badass and raw. And then he just says, "See you on the high seas, Luffy," as he departs. And again, this is laying seeds for future foundations. It was built up that we would meet Ace in Alabasta, which was awesome. But Ace is just part of the introductory part of Alabasta. I don't think he'll be coming back to Alabasta. I think he'll be coming back in a future arc. And I think that's great, because this arc could have easily become a bit too bloated or unfocused with too many elements here. It could have, strained under its own weight in that way. So I like that Oda is able to not get too impulsive with dropping too many things at once and just being smart with the structure and pacing here and how things are introduced. Ace will get his time, but it's not now. The role for Ace in Alabasta was to plant future seeds and characterize him further and give us lots of intrigue and hooks and substantiate him, but not make him the main focus. His role was minimalistic here, and that's great. That's smart, it's clever, and it's good for the pacing and focus and structure of Alabasta, and I'm sure it'll pay off in the arc that Ace will be in the future. He doesn't overstay his welcome, he keeps the arc rolling, keeps things flowing, and it's great. And a nice little detail that was pointed out to me is that Drum Island, the day that Ace was waiting there, or the time that Ace was waiting there, not sure the exact amount of time it was, but it wasn't snowing the time that Ace was on Drum Island because of his heat. That's cool. That's so cool. It's another little bit of attention to detail, similar to what I talked about earlier about the reason for why Don Krieg was hungry after coming out of the Calm Belt. Just very smart. And one more thing about Ace that I think is really cute / cool is Zoro looks on at Ace, and the whole crew is enamored with Ace too, in one way or another, or just taken aback by him in one way or another. And Zoro is just so impressed by him, and he thinks he's the coolest guy alive, and he's just going, man, he was a little bit jealous of Ace, of Luffy having Ace. He wants a big brother like that, so it was kind of cute. As things keep rolling on, we get introduced to the specific people at the upper ranks of Baroque Works. We have Miss Doublefinger, All Sunday, who we know as Robin, who is the counterpart of Mr. Zero, Sir Crocodile. We have Mr. One, who gets introduced here, and his counterpart is Doublefinger. Then we have Mr. Tubon Clay, who's representing both gender roles. We have Mr. Three, who has bandages all over his face, and is clearly AWOL, or something weird's going on with him. We know his deal with Miss Golden Week. We then have Mr. 4 with Miss Merry Christmas, and they have some notable roles in this arc, as of what I've read. Not super significant, but they're a factor. And then we have Miss Valentine and Mr. 5. Those are the top 6 ranked Baroque Works counterparts, male and female, etc. So I just like that was laid out in front of us, because some of these characters become more prominent, and it's just good to see them at first glance, I guess. What's really cool that's shown to us is that Nami actually sews the paper that Ace gave to Luffy into his hat. So that represents more than just his dreams now. It has even more extra weight. It's his dreams, it represents Shanks, what he's doing for him, that inherited will, in a sense. Essentially a symbol of, in my opinion, camaraderie and connection throughout the crew. His dreams, his freedom, and now his emotional connection to his brother, and that promise of how they're going to be brought back together again. So I love that that's sewn into his hat. It seems like something very Luffy. It's something that he would want to do, and it's very meaningful and symbolic. So things gather steam as they plan to carry out what they need to do to save this kingdom. Vivi notably starts standing up for what she really needs to do. She takes leadership here, she takes prominence here, she is not wavering at all, and she is completely ready to approach this with courage, using a lot of what she's learned from the crew, of course, but that is some inner strength as well. She always had it within her, it just needed to be unearthed a little bit. And it's a culmination of her journey so far. She grows in confidence, grows in prominence, and all the crew are there to support her, and it's really beautiful. Then we have a meeting of the antagonist group here, as all of Baroque Works' agents meet in Spider's Cafe, I think it's called, a cafe, a headquarters of sorts. Mr. 1 storms in, he's very rough around the edges, he had destroyed Mr. 2 Bon Clay's men, because they were an obstacle for him. We're introduced to Pola, who seems to be some sort of mediator. We later learn that she is Miss Doublefinger, Mr. 1's counterpart, but interesting that she has that sense of calmness and intelligence to mediate things despite being a high-ranking member here. It distinguished her a little bit in the beginning for sure. So they all congregate, and then they go from this cafe to meet Sir Crocodile. They don't know it's Sir Crocodile, but they go to meet Mr. Zero for the first time in Rain Base. Luffy and company arrive in a place called Erumalu. It's said to be this green city, but it really doesn't seem to be. It's been clearly affected by drought, it's very arid. It doesn't hold any of the memories of green, Chrono Trigger reference, that this place is supposed to have. And so that's a nice little detail that keys you into what actually happened here. We have a bit of a confrontation with some creatures called Dugons. There's some hijinks, and Luffy eventually becomes their quote-unquote master, or they become his apprentice. They have great respect for Luffy, which is consistent with his ability to connect with animals in one way or another, just through little touches. What I'm talking about is what happened with the Lapins on Drum Island as well. There seems to be a consistent thread of that, just very, very subtle, and maybe I'm looking too much into it, but it has happened on multiple occasions. Then there are some really interesting details that are said to us here. The river in and around this area has actually become flooded by sea, so the seawater has replaced the river water, and I found that very symbolic. I don't know exactly why or what that could represent, but I just get the idea that it's representative of, for example, this place that used to be self-sustaining, this kingdom in and of itself that's grand and vast, yet independent and closed off. It's been overtaken by foreign forces, Baroque Works, and there's been discord sowed within it internally. That invasion of sorts, I think, is representative of the sea overtaking the river water. That's just what I thought when I read that. It seemed to fit, I don't know. And then it said that this used to be this green city, but it hasn't experienced rainfall for 3 years. And then we get a backstory for the cause of all these problems, essentially. And it all comes back to rain. Alubarna, the capital, the royal capital where the king is the place that traditionally got the most rain. It was known as a miracle town, until an incident 2 years ago that changed the complexion of everything. So there is this powder, this mystical powder called Dance Powder, that essentially summons the rain for an area. And it doesn't just summon it, what it essentially does is monopolize it by soaking it in from surrounding areas and then planting it in specific ones. So what happened is Sir Crocodile planted it in Vivi's dad's domain. That monopolized the rain for Alubarna, that sowed the seeds of him being this greedy king and keeping it all for himself. It caused disharmony, caused strife internally, grumblings, and people started to get frustrated as rain wasn't being spread everywhere. People were falling on hard times, everywhere else was becoming arid, and it was just not good. There was tensions rising. And essentially the rebellion started due to a conflict for resources as they became more and more scarce, and general irritation aimed towards the king, Cobra, for apparently being selfish with regards to the rain. And then a fight ensued, and then there was this conflict. This is essentially the root of it. It's very intelligent from the part of Sir Crocodile, understanding the values in society here, and how resources could quickly become scarce, how people could put 2 and 2 together with regards to where the rain falls, and that would sow this disharmony. And just knowing in general, like, this is not a mindless plan. This is very clever, this is very intelligent, it's long-term, and this is how Baroque Works did it. We then learned that the world government, who we learned about in Drum Island, abolished Dance Powder because of the volatility of it. And we see here, yet again, that the world government has a ton of agency. They do act. We'll learn more details about them and whether all their actions are correct or sound, or if there's more behind this. But what is clear is that they do make decisions, they do carry out policies, and they don't just sit on their ass. They aren't indolent, and that puts them, again, in huge contrast to Wapol from Drum Island, and that further reinforces the idea that they do things. And so Vivi essentially told us this. This was said by Vivi. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but yeah, this exposition, this backstory was told to us through Vivi. And there's a great panel as she is very emotional and great imagery as she has this skull in her hands. She seems to be mourning for her kingdom and what has become, and the death that has resulted from this drought. And we know Vivi, she wants to save everyone, and this just deeply upsets her. So it's extremely powerful imagery as we see silhouettes of people fighting in the background and her just holding this skull to herself, looking very emotional and very saddened. And obviously, due to this, she cannot forgive Sir Crocodile for what he's done. It's just great communication of these panels here. There's lots of negative space to show the sort of desolate nature of the world here, or the setting here, and to further emphasize her words, and great expressions from the crew who hear her story and further reinforce their desire to help her. She's one of them. She's one of us. We have to stand up for her. So they continue past Edumalu to make their way over to the rebel base in Yuba. And obviously this is a very arid desert. Their water is in short supply. Luffy needs some water, and they go, okay, just a sip, just take a sip, and he ends up having a whole ton of it. He then is scammed essentially by these fake dead birds who are playing dead, who essentially steal all the crew's materials and supplies. 3 days worth of supplies. And what I like here is that Sanji gets deeply upset at him. He gets mad at Luffy for wasting these resources, because Luffy loves food, Luffy loves water, but he has been wasteful in the past, and it hasn't been a huge deal. But here is a very desperate situation where every little bit matters, and again, Luffy is being a bit too impulsive, and Sanji tells him, straight up, you have to think for more than just yourself here. And so I like that. It's a very natural sort of conflict that would come up. It's great to see the Straw Hats always getting along and always being there for each other, but this is just natural that there are going to be arguments that are going to occur, especially in a situation like this where they're traveling across this desert, low on food, morale, water, etc. And there's great maturity here again from Zoro. Nice little moment as he just goes, you guys need to settle down. We need to rest. The heat's getting to you. This is not going to get us anywhere. What's happened has happened, and let's just rest, refuel, and then continue on. Again, nice little touches for Zoro. But then, with every descent, there is an ascent, and Zoro, Luffy, and Sanji then work together to take out some monster, and they go, hey, can we eat this? Which just shows that there will be conflict between them, and that's very believable and understandable, but they'll always rise from it and come together in service of something else, with very humorous end results in some ways. They find some camels which will help them travel faster. Those camels are just horny and only like women though, so that puts some limitations on their traveling, but helps them a little bit. The camel's name is Eyelashes, I think. Yeah. Luffy then has some cactus juice and hallucinates, which again shows his affinity, or whatever the opposite of affinity is, I guess weakness, to hallucinations. We saw that in Syrup Village. We saw that with the color power from Miss Golden Week. And we see again, Luffy is prone to hallucinations, and that continues to be a factor. Then we get a really nice montage of sorts, showing the passing of time as the crew continues to go through the desert. There are some humorous bits, some nice bits, some funny bits, nice interaction throughout, and then they think they reached Yuba because they see a light. But what ends up happening is, while this is Yuba, it's being hit by a sandstorm. And then we get introduced to the sole person, it seems, who is in Yuba. Old Man Toto, who is a sympathizer with the Loyalists, who doesn't like what the rebels are doing, and who has immense trust in his king no matter what. He and Vivi know each other, and there's a very emotional reunion moment as Vivi remembers this man who had a pretty significant impact on her early childhood, and sees the state that he's in. He's extremely malnourished, he is clearly falling on hard times, and yet he clings to this loyalty to her dad, to the royal family, to the king, to all of that. And I can't imagine the amount of affection she feels for him in this moment, because, she has consistent insecurities and fears about what's happening with her kingdom, and she always thinks the worst, and the crew are always able to help her from that and pull her back, but those fears remain, and until this gets nipped in the bud, they'll always remain, and so it's something that's constantly on her mind. Do people trust my family? is my kingdom going to survive? Are people just going to die? But the fact that he remains loyal to her, despite all this propaganda and whatever, means the world, and you can really tell. Then we learn that the rebels have abandoned Yuba. It's no longer a base. Kateria is the new base, a place closer to Nanohana, and Toto tells them all this while continuously telling them that he believes in the king, that the things that are being said about him are all lies. Then we get a flashback to earlier in their lives when Toto was younger and much more healthy, and we see his son Koza. Koza is complaining to Cobra about the weather being selective, all that sort of thing. And Cobra says to him, the weather is chosen by gods, we have no control over it. But Koza is nonetheless very resolute in standing up for the economic disparity that is clearly present in the kingdom. These are admirable ideals to an extent, and Cobra respects this. He respects the young man despite the young man having told him that, what he should do very brashly and ignoring standing on ceremony and all the niceties that you're supposed to do in these political situations. Toto consistently apologizes for his son's impudence, but Cobra doesn't mind. Cobra just says, I like the cut of his jib. And this further emphasizes that Cobra is a good guy, He's a good person. But Vivi, as a little girl, takes note of Koza and what he did and sees him as in some ways, admirable person. Koza leads a gang. Vivi challenged him, and eventually they fought, they bonded, they become friends, and Vivi became the second in command of this gang. She often came by the residence to talk with Toto and hang out with Koza and the gang, and the fact that this princess would descend from her lofty status to these regular common folk to play with them, it was seen as a great thing for this societal disparity. It made the kingdom feel a lot more unified, and Vivi was the cause of that. And it really speaks of the type of person she is. She is so for the people, so for connections with others, regardless of status. And this is a great element to a leader. Again, she has that heart. While she does this, we have Igaram and Cobra looking after her, but yeah, she transcends this class divide in a really wholesome way. But one day, the gang is attacked by other men. They're after Vivi, and Koza and the rest of the gang protect Vivi. They fend them off, and Cobra and Igaram end up stopping this conflict, and Cobra is deeply appreciative towards Koza. And Cobra is deeply appreciative towards Koza for defending Vivi. He celebrates him and he honors him, and this brings up an idea between the two families to erect this town, Yuba, that will be a crossroads region for Toto and his family to look after. And it's seen as this new step for a prosperous future of a more connected and harmonious Alabasta. And it's really wild to see the contrast with all this hope, and there is so much hope for the future and so much richness in this land and connection in this land, to compare it to what's happening now. It's very sobering. It's currently desolate, there's drought everywhere, Toto is so skinny, he's fallen on hard times, and yet his loyalty to the king is unwavering. And a couple of lovely little bits before the flashback ends is that before Koza and Toto go off to Yuba to do their job there, Cobra asks Koza, "Do you love this kingdom?" And he goes, "Yeah, I do." And Cobra says, "Yep, me too." And it's a lovely moment between them, but very sad because we know what happens with Koza. He becomes one of these rebels, and this faith that he seemed to have in the king is totally shaken. And it ends up being the crux of why the two sides go against each other. Both sides love their kingdom. I'm getting ahead of myself. And then there's a lovely little bit where I think it was Igaram and Cobra talk about Vivi's idealism. And, is she a bit foolhardy? Is she a bit too innocent and naive? Is she a bit too optimistic and hopeful given the world we exist in? And Cobra looks at it as a beautiful thing. He doesn't think there's a problem with this, and he loves that Vivi is this optimistic. It has to be balanced with realism in instances, but this sentiment is essentially the heart of why she can be a great queen or princess. But yeah, we time skip back to the present, and we learn that Koza is a rebel. He's leading the rebel forces. He bought into the propaganda, he believed the rumors, he was radicalized, he believes Baroque works and what they were stirring up, and he now is in Kateria, the base of the rebels. And it's just so sad to see that this character, this boy who had such hope for the future, slowly had that hope whittled away. Through just consistent doubt and rumors and information and propaganda that just made him doubt the very thing that he had such enthusiasm for. Again, it's very sobering. I think it's very effective, and it makes Koza, while antagonistic in a way, obviously, very understandable and sympathetic, to me at least. I think Koza is a very solid character, and the beginning part of Alabasta does a huge amount for him. And what's great is that despite him opposing them through being a rebel, Vivi has confidence, full confidence, that she'll be able to stop the rebellion, because she knows Koza, she knows what he's like. She takes up this mantle once more, and there's that beaming, genuine smile that she learned to smile from the Straw Hats as she says this, and it's very beautiful. This idealism and this fierce determination to do this. Will she be able to accomplish it? Who knows, but she doesn't shy away. And then there's some very nice party banter again as they rest before going to set out to Kateria. There's some really fun banter, there's some pillow fights, and Vivi gets hit and she just smiles. It's just so lovely to see her with this group of people that mean so much to her. And the reason she can have such confidence that she's going to be able to stop the rebellion is because of them, and I think she knows that, and she's grateful. Toto and Luffy have a bit of a dialogue before they go out. He continues to dig to help Yuba prosper. Just like he has faith in the king, he has total faith that Yuba is hardy and will survive this whole situation. And Luffy sees this, and he respects it, and he helps him dig. He falls asleep digging during the night, and Toto really appreciates it and puts him to bed, and it's a very sweet moment of connection between those two. Luffy respects his heart and this treasure of his. During this time, Baroque Works then congregate at Rain Base, at Rain Dinners, maybe, I think it is, the place, whatever. Either way, it's a casino at the center of Rain Base, and many are surprised at Sir Crocodile's identity. They didn't know that he was Mr. Zero, that they're being led by a government dog. But eventually, Sir Croc introduces Project Utopia. Operation Utopia, rather. He wants excessive military might and forces, and he outlays for them the operation here, the true aim of Baroque Works, and that is that they're apparently going to take away some huge treasure of sorts. The conversation is cut such that Oda is able to refrain from telling us the important information in terms of specifics, clearly for some sort of drama later on in the arc, but what's clear is that he wants military might, he wants to take over, and they're after some sort of treasure. Interesting commonality between him wanting a treasure and what the nature of that treasure may be in the protagonists as well. But everything is in preparation for this. Every member of Baroque Works, every agent, they have a role to play here. Essentially, Alabasta is to fall, self-destruct in this war and blood, and in the ashes settling, a utopia will be created, and people will fall in line and follow Baroque Works. This is the mission, this is the overall concept and plan for Operation Utopia. And then Mr. 3 comes in the meeting, having evaded capture or death or whatever, and Sir Croc quickly finds out that he didn't actually talk to him on the phone in Little Garden, that he talked to Sanji. Well, he doesn't know it's Sanji, he knows it was someone, and that he was duped. And Mr. 3 then talks about the people he saw. He says, the information was faulty, I saw these 4 people. I think it was Usopp, Zoro, Nami, and Luffy. And then Mr. 2 Bon Clay realizes that the people he met earlier on in the arc were the people they're up against. And he sees that Miss Wednesday was Vivi, and he mentions every single character except Sanji. He didn't touch Sanji, so that is a bit of a seed for a future plot point. But so yeah, Baroque Works now understands what's going on. They understand the ways in which they were duped and the plan now. And what the plan ends up being is that Sir Crocodile understands that Vivi and Koza, leader of the rebels there, have a history, and so he fears that Vivi going to him will end up causing the rebellion to falter, to fizzle out. Just as Vivi has faith in her abilities to stop the rebellion, so does he. He fears that, and so he says we need to head them off and stop them from going to the rebels, because that could ruin these plans. Then back with the party, Luffy says he quits. As they're about to head out to Kateria, he says this isn't the best course of action. He essentially says, why are we screwing around with the rebels here? We need to cut off the head of the snake, and Sir Crocodile is the head of the snake. We need to be focused on this one objective. We can't worry about every single other life out there and every rebellion. Stopping the rebellion isn't going to stop Sir Crocodile, but stopping him will be the root of all this. Like I said, he's the head of the snake. And Sanji, in response to that, says, sometimes he makes sense for an idiot, which I did enjoy. But Luffy essentially calls her naive for thinking that you can stop the rebels and that no one will die in the process and that this war won't lead to casualties. It harkens back to what Cobra and Igaram were saying in the flashback. Is she too idealistic? Questioning that. And they ultimately concluded, no, she isn't. We need that sentiment. But there are caveats here. Luffy calls her naive, and Nami retorts, but Sanji tells her just hold on, let him talk, which, you know, when Sanji stops simping, you know things are serious. And then Vivi says, what's so wrong about not wanting people to die? And then Luffy just says, people die. That's the reality. Vivi punches him, and she just screams and yells about how she doesn't want anyone in the kingdom to die, and Luffy lambasts her completely for putting herself at risk, and I'm pretty sure he punches her back. He calls out some hypocrisy here. He says, you don't want anyone else to die, and yet you're putting your own life at risk. You are the most important person here. You are the hope for a better future here, and you put yourself at risk for these people. He essentially says you need to look at the world in clearer, more realistic terms. People die. That is going to happen. You can't prevent that, especially in a situation like this. And he says to her, you think risking your life alone is going to be enough? And she says, then what else can I risk? And Luffy says, at the very least, our lives too. We are your friends. He essentially says to her, don't be afraid to depend on others. It's okay. Don't feel like you're alone because you're not. We're friends. We lean on each other. Leaders don't need to be alone. Leaders can lean on others. Rulers don't have to be desolate. It doesn't have to be this lonely path to the top where you can't confide in anyone or depend on anyone. And Luffy knows this better than anyone. In Arlong Park, he straight up says, I would be nowhere without my friends, but because I have them, I can be free and do what I need to do. And it's again that idea of these different aspects of leadership that was kind of tackled in Drum Island, but more divergences in this case. So we have essentially what is the reverse of what happened at the beginning of Drum Island. Luffy was being too impulsive, and Vivi told him, you're gonna be a shitty leader if you continue doing this. You need to think logically at times. You're putting Nami's life at risk. Think about your friend. So she helped Luffy learn there, and he was very open to it and said, you're right, I'm being too hot-headed. I have to restrain myself sometimes. And so she rubbed off on Luffy there in a really beautiful way and helped him grow a greater sense of what leadership means and the type of leader he should be. Here is the reverse. He teaches her how the world works essentially in some ways. That one, you don't have to do this all on your own, and two, sometimes people do just die, and she needs to understand that and factor it into her plans to understand where to go and how to prioritize things for the best course of action. Now, what I love about this is I think that Vivi's naivete is beautiful, and I don't think the story is criticizing her desire to save everyone. I think what's being criticized here is that she doesn't take into account the nature of the world and how things just are in factoring it into her plans and prioritizing. It's very powerful, it's very her, it's very compassionate and empathetic and heartfelt that she wants to save everyone. That resolve is beautiful, and I think it's something she should strive for, and I think it's something that the story says as well, that you should give up and accept that everyone dies, but that you should strive to save everyone while knowing that it's very improbable and that people will die, and to not be broken by that. I think it tinges her philosophy with realism, because Luffy says later on he deeply admires her for taking this stance, but it just doesn't lead to the best, it isn't conducive to the best course of action if you don't factor in the fact that people just die. And so there is that idealism here, that overly idealistic nature, but I think it's beautiful. It's that heart over reason aspect in a certain way that Igaram and Cobra talked about and that Cobra admired, that Luffy admires. He doesn't dislike this about Vivi, he thinks it's beautiful, but he also thinks that you need to take in other perspectives, just as he took in her perspective with regards to his impulsivity. So I do think all of that will stand her in good stead, but Luffy's perspective here is very important for making her a bit more pragmatic when making decisions. But I also think that Vivi will have a chance to show why her approach is valuable, and I don't think Luffy is criticizing her approach and sentiment as much as just be more aware. And Vivi is able to have her eyes open in this way. He imparts some of his wisdom on her. The Vivi-Luffy dynamic and relationship is so beautiful. I think it's so great as these two leaders in different sorts of scenarios or contexts, two different leaders contextually, nonetheless are able to share their experiences with one another and have this bond and learn from one another. And so they change their course and they head to Sir Croc, which is interesting because Sir Croc, sorry about shortening his name, I'll try not to do that super often, but he told his forces to head them off before Kateria. Turns out they're not even going to Kateria. Now, as they travel, Usopp wants to drink some water, some of the water that Toto got and gave them for their journey. And what's interesting is that Luffy, in contrast to before, where he would drink everything, says, no, don't drink that. The old man did it for us, so let's use it at a time where we really need it, which is just shows a progression of Luffy understanding the gravity of these sorts of things, and also that respect for Toto. And he's showing the restraint here that Vivi taught him before, in some ways. So I think that's just really nice. And Luffy just tells Vivi, you better feed me till I explode after I beat Sir Croc. And she just says, hell yeah, and she smiles. And it's just really sweet. We then go to Koza's perspective. Koza waves someone off who wants to join the rebels, saying that it's not worth it, you don't have the resolve, there's so much to lose, and he shows his friend, or someone, a comrade, who's lost a huge chunk of his shoulder and the bottom half or so of his arm. And then the child says, I'm not afraid of that, to which Koza has something very interesting to say. He says, that's ridiculous. Well, you're not afraid? I am afraid. I don't want to fight, we don't want to fight, but it's something we have to do even if we don't want to do it. They have to fight because they're at war. What they love is being threatened and they have to protect it. Their dream, their treasure, not dream, their home, again that common theme, is being threatened, and they have to do what they must so that it stays, so that it's maintained. And so you see, he yells at this kid to go home to not join. He still has that heart. He's still very heartfelt, he's still very compassionate. That kid that we saw in the flashback is still very much there. He's just bought into the wrong words. He's not had enough trust in Cobra to see past the propaganda like his father did. And I think it's very understandable, especially in these sorts of frustrating situations, especially considering that he's young. It all makes sense that he would be part of the rebels, and I think that while it's easy to dislike him for being antagonistic and buying into these lies, I don't at all. I think he's a very understandable character and a very important perspective and face for the rebels and what they're doing, and making them feel very human. And that kid's reckless behavior and impulsiveness reminds him a little bit of his young self, calling his young self naive and saying that he's way different now. And so the reason the rebels are in Kateria is so that they can grab weapons and take them to Alabasta and invade. And then in Alabasta, Cobra's being told by his men Pell and Shaka that the rebels are advancing, but he refuses to strike back at his people, because the people are what make his kingdom what it is. Instead of fighting the outward manifestation of the root cause, he wants to fight the root cause, which is Sir Crocodile, and eliminate it. But he doesn't know it, so it's just difficult to find it right now. Very similar to Luffy. He doesn't want to fight his own people, he wants to just get to the root of the problem and solve it that way without killing the people that make Alabasta what it is. And I think it's a beautiful sentiment. Do I think it's possible that that pans out that way? I don't know. Kind of doubtful, but he has very similar elements of idealism that Vivi have that I think are quite admirable. And that's what I'm noticing in this arc a little bit. The benefits of idealism, and whether idealism and realism can coexist. So Shaka and Pell are discussing Cobra's refusal to attack the rebels and whether it's a good move or not, whether he's being too soft, whatever. They wonder about Igaram and how he left the country with Vivi, and they say we can only trust in them, and then they get Karu's message. Karu, who pushed himself and is foaming at the mouth, bless his soul, to give this news to Cobra about the true nature of what's going on from Vivi, and so Cobra learns this. A nice little detail is that they notice the band on his wing, and Karu says no, don't take it off. He's very defensive about it because it means it represents that bond and that emotional connection to the rest of the crew. He doesn't want it touched. It may have to do with the fact that there is also that mark underneath it as well. So it's clever in a couple ways. But upon learning about the true plan of Sir Crocodile, Cobra decides he needs to die. And so now that he knows what the head of the snake is, Cobra says Sir Crocodile must die. And even if Sir Crocodile has the hearts of the people, the populace, the public, we need to do this. It may incite more rebellion, but this is what needs to be done to quell this. He will not fight his own people against Sir Crocodile, but he will fight the momentum of the people and the populace and the public perception to go against him. He says, even if it costs me my life, I will kill him. Uh-oh. And then now that he knows this information, he wasn't just being defensive for the sake of it. Cobra, now that he knows this information, now has a plan with which to attack, to go forward with. So he says, we now go on the offensive. We will attack Rain Base, we'll bring the fight to them. He's going to go with a subset of the Royal Army to Rain Base, and obviously some are going to be left behind in Alubarna with Shaka to defend it if necessary. Pel's job is just general utility to do scouting and things like that, and that's how things are headed. And Pel and Shaka realize they underestimated their leader here. He's very intelligent, and at this moment, Luffy and friends are going to Rain Base for Sir Croc. The Royal Army is going to attack Baroque Works at Rain Base as well, and the rebels plan to attack the Royal Army at Alubarna, with 17 hours left till Operation Utopia. We get a bit of a time skip, and now there's 1 hour left until the operation. The crew, the Straw Hats, make their way to Rain Base, and they're in a position where they're ready to infiltrate. They plan to be cautious because there are eyes all over the city, but Luffy just says, we have to be straightforward, we have to go for it. And Vivi agrees. She wants to attack straight away with Luffy. There's no need for patience here, just be confident, be simple. It's go time. And that's another nice way that Vivi has learned from Luffy, I think. And the crew is ready for a fight. And then we have Smoker and Tashigi who are in Rain Base due to Smoker's hunch. Hell of a hunch. He knows that something's off with Alabasta, he's seen it, he can see the tension, something weird is brewing. And then Luffy and Usopp, who are starving and parched, go in to get a bunch of water very humorously, and they then spit it in his face. They had come to get water for the crew, but this happened. Smoker chases after them, and the crew splits up amongst the commotion and decide to meet at Rain Base, because they can't get in quietly now, but so they split up and they're going to congregate once they get there. But there's skirmishes with the Navy chasing them, there's so much panic everywhere. Zoro fights off the Navy and then finds Tashigi, and he realizes that he can't fight her. Now, that's huge. Is that because she's reminiscent of Quina and he doesn't want to fight her because of that and what she represents? Zoro not fighting someone is a big deal. Is it because he doesn't want to break his idealized image of Quina as this superior swordsman? I don't know, there's a lot there, and I really like the underlying development of Zoro with regards to Tashigi, because I think it reveals quite a bit of his character that may not be upfront, but there are things bubbling underneath. There's a hilarious panel of Nami and Usopp just crying while running away from some of their adversaries. It's really funny. I love those two together whenever they are together, but Usopp fends them off, which is really good. They then, I don't know if I said they'll meet again at Rain Base or Rain Dinners. Either way, they meant Rain Dinners, and then a bunch of them meet at Rain Dinners, and they go, wait, where's Vivi? Because Vivi's missing. She's probably ahead of us. No. Have you not read fiction before? Vivi is nowhere near ahead of you. There's no chance, but they make that assumption anyway, and they go in. And Sir Crocodile and Miss All Sunday / Robin are there ready to greet them, and they enter the casino, and Luffy just yells out, where are you? And Luffy wants to call him out, and it doesn't work out super well, and Nami lambasts him because this casino is full of citizens who love Sir Crocodile, and he calls him out, like, come on, dude. But the problem is, only Vivi knows what he looks like, and Vivi's not with them, they don't know where she is. So they're just like, I don't know what to do. But Smoker continues to chase them, and they're told by the people who work there, welcome sirs, are you one of the VIPs? And they're brought up to a hallway that says VIPs one way and pirates the other, and it's just hilarious, and Luffy's just going, what's a VIP? I don't know, but I'm a pirate, and Smoker's in the back chasing them going like, VIP? Are they important to Sir Crocodile? I don't know, whatever, and he just chases them. Luffy goes to the pirate direction and goes, oh no, it's a trap door! Oh no, and it's just the stupidest trap in the world, and it catches them, and I love how Smoker gets caught in it too, and Nami's just yelling at Luffy like, are you stupid? Usopp was being really dumb with it too. I enjoyed it a lot. But yeah, they get captured, they get stuck in this jail cell essentially, and I think the way in which they were captured shows that Miss All Sunday, Robin, knows of Luffy's simple nature maybe is interpersonally intelligent enough to see that in him, and knows that this will help, or this will capture him. Not sure. It could indicate that. But so we have Nami, Usopp, Zoro, Luffy, and Smoker all stuck together. Smoker hits Luffy with this Sea Prism Club, and this is a really cool bit of world building. It's a Sea Prism Club, and a Sea Prism is a stone that has all the power of the ocean within it, so it works super effectively against people who have consumed devil fruits. That weakens Luffy, obviously, and what's also said is that the bars of lots of cells throughout the land are imbued with sea prisms to keep in people who have devil fruit powers, and that's just very cool. It's very intelligent. It's something that would come about to combat people with devil fruit powers. And so, yeah, of course this world has it, and I love that detail that Oda added in there. Things are about to kick off, Zoro's about to fight Smoker, but then we see that Sir Crocodile interrupts them and he's right outside the cell, and he's extremely taunting. He says that they'll all die, Smoker will die, he'll make up a story about how Smoker died fighting these pirates, and Luffy just so desperately wants to fight him, trying to get through the bars even though it's hopeless, really showing in an encapsulation of Luffy the way he strives against what seems like implausibility or impossibility. Just a nice encapsulation of him there as he tries to get at Sir Crocodile. Sir Crocodile mocks Luffy. He mockingly says, "I'm so impressed you made it out here, I'm gonna have to kill you personally." There might have been a modicum of genuine respect in there as well. Don't know quite what to make of it, but there is a mocking tone there nonetheless. But then he says, first we need to welcome a guest of honor, who Robin is bringing. And it's clear that that's going to be Vivi. So Vivi is cornered by the Baroque Works minions. She gets saved by Pell, who was doing his scouting stuff, who has the Tweet fruit, devil fruit, so he can transform into an animalistic, humanistic falcon. Tweet fruit falcon version, I think is what it was called, something like that. But then Miss All Sunday, Robin, comes in and she needs to capture Vivi, and Pell squares off against her. It does not go well. But what we learn here is that Robin has a devil fruit power as well, a flower fruit, which helps her to grow new body parts, which is wild. The way it was illustrated was crazy. It's just crazy out there, but lots of application, I'm sure. She fake kills Vivi using this, using these fake arms and stuff like that. I didn't for a second think that she would die there. I knew there was some sort of hijinks, as I'm sure you guys all did as well. And yeah, illustrates her power in that way. But she dispatches of Pell. Not that he's dead, he was just badly injured. And then Robin takes Vivi to rain dinners to meet with Sir Croc and her crew. While the crew are in jail, Luffy is making a funny Sanji impression. It was pretty damn hilarious. Usopp is laughing at that, and Nami's just going, "What the hell are you guys doing?" Playing the straight man really well again. Zoro's just sleeping. I feel bad for Nami sometimes, the chaotic shit she has to deal with. And then there's a really funny moment where Nami tells off Sir Crocodile, saying, "Enjoy this while you can. When this guy gets out of the cage," pointing at Luffy, "he's just gonna kick your butt." And Luffy's going, "Yeah, I'm gonna kick your butt, yeah." And it reminded me of that Spider-Man meme from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, where Mary Jane's just like, "He said whatever," you know the meme, right? Hopefully. But yeah, I just found that funny. And Sir Crocodile, upon seeing that, Faith says, "She has a lot of trust in you, but trust is the most overrated thing in the world." Which is an interesting line that I imagine will allude to his backstory or to his character in some sort of way. So just putting a pin in that, but it's a very interesting line. Vivi shows up, shows immense courage in confronting Sir Crocodile. We have a really nice side glance from Zoro, seemingly impressed at Vivi's courage and perseverance, because it's one thing to talk about it, but actually doing it and confronting him here, it really shows how far she's come. And then Vivi attacks him with this string slasher, it's called the Peacock String Slasher, and takes off his head. Seems to kill him, but what happens is he shifts into sand and appears behind her in some really great, very dark and ominous and threatening art, where he says, "Don't you know about my powers of the Sand fruit?" So he's consumed a devil fruit as well, the Sand power, and I just love what it adds to the aesthetic of the character, in terms of being so mysterious and shifty, in terms of what the origin of what his motives are, and I don't know, the sand just really adds to his aesthetic and character, and it makes him essentially near impossible to kill using traditional methods. So interesting to see how they'll combat that. But it's then said the clock hits 7 o'clock and Operation Utopia has commenced. The long day is beginning. So then we go back to Alubarna. Chaka has taken charge, like I said. Cobra's gone traveling. They don't really know where he is, but he intended to go to Rain Base. At the same time, Koza and the rebels head out, and we have a very emotional little sequence of panels for Koza as he reflects back on what his father told him, his father's unerring faith, that faith that Toto has in the king. And there's segments throughout his life from when he was starting to doubt the king, and Toto continuously said to believe in the king, and it's so difficult for him to go against what his father says, but it's just what he believes at this point. It's what he's forced to do in what he believes is service for his country. And it makes sense, and it's difficult, and it makes Koza very resonant as a character. And I love what Oda does with him. Like I said, I think he's a very important, antagonistic at this point, but still sympathetic viewpoint that makes the rebels very human. He's a great face for the rebels. And his father continuously says, trust in the king. It will rain. And Koza, at some point in the past, went up to the king, to King Cobra, and said, I just can't stand to see so many places succumb to drought, so many villages. He has such love for his kingdom, and just as he was as a child, he's so deeply caring for it that he can't stand to see people in pain, and this is the core of his actions. He has to take action in some way. And Cobra says something very telling. He says, you haven't changed, and he sees this parallel between child Koza and how Koza is now, and he says, yes, I have. The difference now is that I can fight. I'll be back for the rain. He's still bullheaded to protect that which he cares about. He's still stubborn, a little tunnel-visioned, and still very heartfelt. But he says the difference is I can fight now. And he thinks these things as he travels to Nanohana. And what's kind of told to us here is that Cobra has appeared in Nanohana. Before I get into that, just a quick little detail on the next cover story series. It's about Kobe. Kobe's trained up. He's being trained up with Garp and Telmeppo, and he's looking good. He's looking strong. Looks like training's going well, so I'm really interested in this series of cover stories, however long they end up being. But yeah, back with Cobra and Nanohana. Cobra's there. He says he's going to apologize for monopolizing the rain, and what he's going to do, the way he's going to do this is by sacrificing Nanohana. Immediately, it's been established, this doppelganger element to, or disguise element to the plot. It's clear that that's Mr. Tubonclay. The kid who wanted to enlist in the rebels pleads with him, saying, please don't destroy Nanohana, and he just kicks him. Very brutally, very heinous. And we see more internalization for Koza, who feels for the people that believed in Cobra. He doesn't want them to have anger and hatred towards him, as he says to Cobra, who is Mr. Tubonclay, but says to him nonetheless, can't you at least lie to make them think that their faith was well placed? Koza thinks so much of the people to a fault that it's all he lives for at this point, it seems like. I'm sure there's more to it, but this is what's driving his actions. He's so heartfelt. He feels for them so much, and he doesn't want the truth to disrupt the sanctity of what they're doing, or what they believe in. A ship then crashes into Nanohana. Mr. One and Miss Doublefinger come into town and continue to raise the place to the ground, and that kid sees Mr. Tubonclay transform and realizes that this is all a lie. This is all predicated on a lie, and that things are being set up to make the rebels attack their own kingdom, despite them being on the same side, through this manipulation. And so he realizes this, but he's silenced by Mr. One and Miss Doublefinger, and he's just knocked out. He's in a horrible state, and Koza sees this and declares war. This is the last straw. He had tried to hold on with all his might, think about what his father said, but this is just too much, and he just says, we take it all down. And it's drawn so beautifully, you can see the conflict and pain in his face, but he just feels that there's no other alternative. And war is declared based on a misunderstanding, based on the manipulations from Sir Crocodile. And there's this rousing speech, a speech to the rebels against the king, against the royals, and it's so twisted and powerful as you lament the flames of war being promoted as a result of rebellion and discord and these manipulations leading into this. So they take an offensive here and head out to Alubarna to take down the kingdom once and for all. And it's so sad and conflicting. Chaka hears of their invasion, their impending invasion, and starts to defend. He sees no choice but to defend themselves, and they need to do this, but he hates this because it goes against what King Cobra said, that we will not fight against our own people. But that very fear is coming to fruition because both sides see it as no other choice, and Shaka kind of has no other choice. He's kind of forced to do this, whereas the rebels just, by their perception, have misunderstood things and now see no other alternative. And so both sides, out of love for their kingdom, are fighting the other, when really they should be on the same side. It's beautifully, deliciously dark from the perspective of Sir Crocodile, as both sides defend their home by attacking each other. It's great dark imagery, a great commentary about, that idea of the seeds of war that have been sown and the origin of that and the pointlessness of fighting that was kind of brought up in Little Garden in some ways. And it's just horrifying. It's this civil war due to misunderstandings, and Sir Crocodile is so smart. It's this huge long-term plan, very intelligent, very societally aware, just so aware of groupthink, psychology, tipping points, and how people react to different types of news and what exactly to do economically, and all of this is just such a great plan by him, unfortunately. And Vivi learns of this stuff happening within her kingdom, and it tears her apart. And she's so determined to stop it regardless, she needs to head off the rebel army before they attack the kingdom, the royal capital. And then Croc asks her, your father or your people, which will you choose? It's so cruel. And he drops the key to the cage that the Straw Hats are in into a tank full of banana gators, which one swallows. By the way, insane design. Wild design for these banana gators. And so Vivi is stuck here. Do I choose my father? Do I choose my people? What is this ultimatum? Do I waste time, or not waste time, but use time saving my friends here? What a difficult position to put her in, because time is totally precious, and Sir Crocodile mentions Toto, and that the reason that Yuba kept being ravaged by sand was because of his powers. He was doing it. Now, the reason of this is to essentially just to break his will, stomp him into the ground, break his spirit, and crush the man who had the most faith and hope, because crushing that man would have been symbolic of the fact that this rebellion really was inevitable, that there really was no hope. What's key is that he didn't crush him, though. Toto still has that faith. And Sir Crocodile wanted to crush Yuba because it was this symbol of hope and prosperity for this new generation. And Toto was the spearhead of that. And so destroying that would destroy the hope for Alabasta. That's why he wanted to continuously break his spirit, but he wasn't able to do it. Nonetheless, it's cruel, though, and it makes it very personal for both Vivi and Luffy. Vivi already was personal, but more so for Luffy now, because he really respects Toto. And Vivi is enraged. She just says, "You know nothing about this country or its people. You don't need anything." And Luffy kind of tries to make her decision for her, asks Vivi to help Luffy, because if she helps him get out of the cage, Luffy will kick Sir Crocodile's butt. Two birds with one stone. You save your friends and you save your kingdom by doing this. So Luffy says that to her. And there was really only one answer here. She was always going to help her friends. The bonds they've shared, the bonds they've built, in contrast to what Igadam told her about being pragmatic, there was only ever one choice that was going to be made here, and so she decides she will free them by getting the key. But she has to take on some monsters for that. And it's so admirable to see her go through so much for her friends, for her people. Your heart just goes out to her so much, and I just feel so much affection for her as a character. But then when it seems like all hope is lost, Sir Crocodile gets a call from Restaurant Le Crap. And notably, Sanji and Chopper have been separate this entire time. They've been split up. And Sanji takes advantage of that here very intelligently. And it's time for Sanji to take center stage. It's a great time for it. It's very intelligent. It shows off his tactical astuteness and his very mocking nature, which I love in the face of Sir Crocodile. And the crew celebrate internally upon hearing this, which is a lovely moment. And Zoro's expression is interesting. He seems almost expectant about it. Maybe reading a bit much into that, but yeah, Sanji fakes his own death on the phone, makes it seem like he was killed. Sir Crocodile goes to the gate to flaunt it, and that ends up being his downfall here, in a way. That pride, which is clear that he has. He has this pride. Vivi continues to try to get the key, suffering this uphill battle, but still resolute and determined to get it. And she eventually realizes, okay, I can't do this. I have limitations here. I have to lean on someone else to get help. Literally what Luffy told her she's doing here to save her friends. So she goes out with the hope of getting Sanji or Chopper or something to come back and help her, to free them. And she says to them, "I won't abandon you." And Luffy and Usopp are just so celebratory. It's such a lovely moment. And Nami is just kind of taken aback at how this woman has grown before their eyes. But Sir Crocodile goes to the front of the casino. He kind of hand waves a lot of the admiration from the populace, which is interesting. He's very disillusioned by it. And then he sees that his men have been destroyed. There's carnage up front, at the front of the casino, by a man called Mr. Prince, apparently, who faked his death and got one over on him. Sir Crocodile chases Chopper as a diversion while Sanji goes in. And I love the utility here for Chopper, how he's very essential to this plan in his first essential arc as a member of the Straw Hats. Very great chemistry here with Sanji, and Sanji gets inside and destroys the bridge that leads inside to delay anyone who would follow them. And he's with Vivi, and Vivi leads him to the crew. And throughout this, Miss All Sunday Robin is looking on at the characters and looking on at Sanji, looking very interesting, very observant, seems to find it borderline amusing at times. There doesn't seem to be much urgency here from her. What's interesting is I think that she knew Sanji. She knew of Sanji, yet she was in those meetings where Sanji wasn't mentioned as a member of the Straw Hats and didn't say anything, which is interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the case. I'm pretty sure. Robin is super interesting. We then get a nice little scene where Chopper transforms back to his regular form as Sir Crocodile walks one way, he comes the other way to evade him. In the meantime, Usopp and Luffy are panicking because the water's rising. That's very scary, by the way. That's one of my worst fears. But Smoker in the back then says something interesting. He says that Miss Allsunday has a $7 million bounty, or berry bounty, during all of this. The whole world is in trouble with these two together, with her teamed up with Sir Crocodile, not just Alabasta. And he says they need to be stopped for this. And you can just see here, Smoker is a good guy, right? He has to be a good guy. Like, he's good at heart. You can just tell. But they're trapped while the water rises as they wait. And there's a nice little moment for Zoro, lots of little moments through this arc for Zoro that are really contributory, as he says to himself, if I was a better swordsman, I could break this cage, which continues that underlying character thread of him feeling like he's just not strong enough with regards to his overall goal of becoming the greatest swordsman, with regards to contributing to the crew. After Little Garden, after being captured by Mr. 3, he said, if I was stronger, we would have been able to get out of there more easily. And he feels very hard on himself. He thinks he wants to be stronger, and he thinks he should be stronger, and this continues here. There's feelings of inadequacy, of self-criticism, and I like that a lot for him. Sanji comes in, and he saves the day, and everyone celebrates except Zoro, who says, hurry the hell up. Vivi comes in and gives Luffy thumbs up, and Luffy gives her thumbs up, and it's beautiful. I love Vivi so much. We then cut to Sir Crocodile, whose pride is damaged because they're making fools out of him. The bridge is destroyed. It's all working well. Sanji's plan is good. And we learn, as the crew confront the Banana Gators, that Mr. 3 is inside one, in some sort of wax ball. I guess he was fed to them due to his failure? I'm not sure. But he throws away the key, and then Usopp just recommends using his wax to use the key to make a new one to get them out of the cell. And it's smart, so they do that, they get out of the cell, and they make their way out of Rain Dinners, or out of this place in Rain Dinners, and Zoro drags Smoker along with him, because they're navigating through water, and obviously Devil Fruit users are weak, so Smoker needs help, Luffy needs help as well, and I think Vivi and Nami help him there, or maybe Sanji. It might have been Sanji. Either way, Smoker is helped by Zoro, and that's big. Zoro says to him, when Smoker asks why you helped me, it was just the captain's orders, but I really don't think that Zoro would be doing something under the captain's orders if he was totally unwilling to do it. And I think that shows that there's a begrudging respect budding between the Straw Hats and Smoker in this way. A familiarity, like I said, a respect, maybe the hints of camaraderie, who knows? I just don't think Zoro would have done that if he didn't buy into what Luffy said. Anyway, Luffy said to save him, but I don't think Zoro would have done it if he didn't at least agree to that to an extent. And then partly to return the favor, partly because they've grown close, once they get out of there, Smoker says, just go. Just this once, I'll let you go. And I love the panel. It's this wide shot of them, kind of silhouetted. And he says, next time we meet, you're screwed. But for now, go ahead. And there are shocked reactions, and Zoro laughs. Great contrast from Zoro. Zoro tends to be contrasting in a lot of those moments where you see lots of faces in reaction to what's going on. Zoro tends to be a contrast in a lot of them, and that continues here. His laugh here was great, and I love this. I said to my stream, I have a prediction that that Smoker will end up being sort of comrades, maybe begrudging, but he's not an antagonist. They'll be comrades in some way with him. They're gonna team up in some way, and this was that kind of fulfilled a little bit. It was very beautiful, and you could just see it was heading towards something like this, and the payoff was great, because it's great for Smoker, it's great for Luffy. I don't know, I like Smoker a lot, and it's very substantial. Luffy here is the reason Smoker ended up coming across the Grand Line from Logtown anyway. He said, I need to stop this guy because of his attitude towards pirates, and yet he's literally just letting him go. The whole reason he's there in the first place, a big part of his identity as a character up till now is his desire to stomp out pirates, it being justice. And Luffy is clearly messing with Smoker's vision of the world because he lets him go in this way. He's known as this chaser, and he lets them go. That is huge, and it's so big, such a turning point. It feels big for Smoker. And like I said, it would be cool to get more of a dive into internalization for Smoker, more about his mind, more about why he thinks the way he does. It's not necessary, but I would like it for sure. I love his role in Alabasta so far. And Smoker then calls for reinforcements to make their way to Alabasta. They ask him about Luffy, he says he'll catch up with him later. Now, his man says that the brass won't approve of getting all these reinforcements just to capture Luffy, and for some measly pirates, I think it said. And just like before, Smoker gives no shits about what the brass think, and that's something I love about his character. Just like they said, they're not going to approve of you chasing after this guy across the Grand Line, and Smoker said, I don't give a shit. He says the same thing here. He doesn't care about red tape or authority, and that's why he stands out so much in the Navy. And I get a feeling those reinforcements will be for combating Sir Crocodile, not Luffy. But could be wrong, we'll see. And so the crew are making their way, they've escaped. Sanji tells Nami to put on some perfume, and that is because I thought it was just him being simpy again, but no, he's being very very resourceful, because in doing that, it was to draw Chopper to them through smell. Chopper's befriended a crab as their ride to travel to Alabasta. And through that smell, he would be drawn towards them, and they'd all be able to get together and travel there really fast. And so it's the payoff of the plot point of talking about how his nose is sensitive to the perfume earlier. So pretty smart. So the whole crew takes off, but then Sir Crocodile appears behind Vivi and appears behind her with the sand smoke thing, and Luffy sacrifices himself to save her. And he says, go on without me to the crew, that he'll catch up afterwards, being stuck behind with Sir Crocodile. A horrible, horrible position to be in, but he says, go on without me, I'll catch up with you. And I couldn't help but think in this moment of Erwin Smith from Attack on Titan, and you know that scene. Susume? I immediately thought of that, couldn't help it. And then at the end of this chapter, I think it's 176, there's a nice visual of all the parties and where they're heading towards at the moment, and it's a nice way of summing things up, because there are a lot of moving parts here, so a visual like this was definitely helpful. But in response to Luffy just saying, go on without me, Zoro grins and just says, let's go, let's do it. He trusts completely in Luffy's capabilities. And Vivi's worried, but all of the crew reassure her through their faith that Luffy will be alright, and it's beautiful because you see their individual trust in him. They care for him, but they're not worried in the way that Vivi is, and they trust that he'll make it through, like he always does. And it's a beautiful way to sum up just how strong their bonds have gotten, and to reinforce Vivi's connection to Luffy as well, because it's so intense, the bonds are so palpable, they all care for one another, they all have a role, they're all together, they're all a found family. It's very immersive and you feel their family bonds, and it is very palpable and beautiful. And then Zoro tells Vivi to refocus her. The rebels and royals can't clash or Alabasta is doomed. It's okay if they die, but Vivi cannot die. She is the shining hope for Alabasta and she needs to survive. And Sanji says that she started this alone through her mission to infiltrate Baroque Works, but now she has people she can rely on, so trust them. And so she agrees, and she calls out to Luffy, I'll be waiting for you in Alabasta, and it's such a beautiful moment. And what really struck out to me here was Zoro and Sanji and everyone essentially reinforcing the fact that they are willing to die for her here. They are willing to die. Zoro literally says it. We can die here, but you cannot. And they're so committed to this Alabasta dream that they're living and dying for it. And what's key is they are living for their dreams, each of their individual dreams and what they want to accomplish. But nonetheless, they're willing to have their dreams unfulfilled, one, because of very similar things to do with Luffy and living proudly in service of the ideals they personify, and also that whole physical death thing, of course, but nonetheless, life isn't a trifling thing. They're giving up on achieving their actual dream here by putting their life on the line for Vivi, and that's how far they've gone. This ended up being a minor annoyance, a bit of a side quest, to something they're all fully invested in, and that growth is so beautiful, in conjunction with Vivi's growth and connection with the crew and growing confidence. So I love that. But now Luffy is alone with Sir Crocodile, and he talks here about Vivi's strength, and how her strength isn't in her fighting, but her heart, and her idealism, and her optimism. And so it's stated out right here, despite him saying that you need to have some realism earlier, he thinks it's beautiful that Vivi thinks the way she does. Even if he said it doesn't work out that way sometimes, it's so admirable. Sir Crocodile says it's unrealistic, and Luffy agrees. But nonetheless, he loves the sentiment, and he loves striving for that, even if you can't achieve that. And he loves how Vivi puts herself on the line for her people, for her dream, for her ideals. She's compassionate, she's got heart, and that is what a leader needs. Drum Island again. That theme cropping up here. And Sir Crocodile mocks Luffy for putting his life on the line for her, but that has always been Luffy. That's how he's been from the beginning. He's been mocked for putting his life on the line for people who he has respect for since the start. That's just him. You know, everything we've talked about before, the physical life, living for your ideals, living for other people, and protecting their dreams. And what's interesting here is that Robin comes up, and Luffy is calling Sir Crocodile a fool, calling him like overly prideful and stupid, or he's insulting him, and Sir Crocodile gets annoyed, and Robin laughs at him. Which is, again, things are not, like, I get the feeling that Robin, you know, she saw Sanji before, she's been amused by the crew and kind of nudging them and helping them in very subtle, don't get me wrong, very dark ways and very malicious ways in certain circumstances, but nonetheless, things are not bueno between her and Sir Crocodile. She has some ulterior motive or something. She laughs at him here, and Sir Crocodile gets annoyed and then calls her by name, and this is the name drop that I've been saying this whole time, Nico Robin. And that's who I thought she was, but just didn't say anything because of spoilers, but yeah, I can say it now. Miss All Sunday is Nico Robin. And what's interesting is that Sir Crocodile, who spends the most time with her probably, says that she's a mystery. He can't make heads or tails of this woman. So that's enticing. But she leaves, she heads to Alabasta, and then Sir Crocodile and Luffy begin fighting. Sir Crocodile starts a timer, an hourglass, and says, after 3 minutes pass, that's when I'll get serious. You have 3 minutes to try to defeat me. And Luffy says okay, and there's really this element of him playing with his prey a little bit, potentially his pride again, showing Luffy that he has this chance, and he's letting him get a chance, but that even with this chance, even with him giving him this chance, he still doesn't have the potential or capacity to beat him, like rubbing his nose in it. Kind of similar to what he did to Toto. It seems pretty consistent to his character. But Luffy just punches him in the face and tells him to shut up. And that's Luffy, right? He looks at the impossible and he just tells it to shut up, and he challenges it anyway. And again, very prideful, very boastful in some ways, but nonetheless wanting to be acknowledged. Sir Crocodile talks about how hard he worked to become this strong, and he kind of seems to think of it as an insult that Luffy thinks he can beat him just by challenging him in this way, while also playing around with him at the same time. It's very interesting. There are lots of factors of characterization at play here in Sir Crocodile. But he sticks Luffy in quicksand. Luffy struggles. I do wonder if that's symbolic of the task that Luffy is taking on, this quicksand, and he sinks further and further as he struggles to make up ground. I don't know. He mummifies Luffy's arm, but Luffy hydrates it using Toto's water, which comes in handy here, using Toto and Toto's hope to thematically be that antithesis and contrast to Sir Crocodile. Very poetic there, how he uses that to help himself. That hope never died from Toto. But the 3 minutes are up, and then Sir Crocodile says Sables, and he unleashes this sandstorm towards Rainbase and Yuba. Seems like all over the damn place. And Smoker and Tashigi look on, the crew look on, as this oncoming doom seems to manifest itself, and it really just feels deeply ominous, this storm. And there are very serious looks here as the crew all wonder about Luffy. Vivi knows it's Croc, they all know the devastation this will bring, but Sir Crocodile says that it's also heading to Yuba, and Luffy is furious because of Toto, and he admires him. He says, leave him out. And he's just one-minded here, he's provoked here, and he's so impulsive, and he gives in to that impulsivity and rage again, and it costs him as he's stabbed. And there's a beautifully horrible silhouette image here in a panel as he's lifted up. It's extremely raw. Sir Crocodile lifts him up, impaled, and just says that people like Luffy are a dime a dozen on the Grand Line. And immediately this feels a lot like another version of the Mihawk-Zoro fight. As Zoro then felt his first defeat, so too does Luffy here. As Zoro then sees the scale of the mountain he's trying to climb, so does Luffy here. As Zoro sees what the Grand Line is representative of through the strength of one of the 7 warlords, so does Luffy. The parallels are so clear. So obviously, even though he's impaled, he's not gonna die. But the question here is, how will he bounce back? Knowing Luffy, he will eventually bounce back, but what will the immediate response to it be? I questioned that with Zoro, and he seemed to bounce back pretty well, but he now has this underlying, I need to get better idea planted in his mind, that feeling of inadequacy a little bit. I do wonder what effect this will have on Luffy, because here he's shown in no uncertain terms the scale of what he's trying to take on. Sir Crocodile just seems to be beyond him right now. And so it brings up the question of, how will this arc end? Will they somehow find a way to kill Sir Crocodile? Will he survive here and be a factor later on? And if so, how does this resolve the conflict in Alabasta? I don't know, but it's so engaging, and I don't know how things are going to go. But this really encapsulates the theme of the improbable dream. Luffy wants to be king of the pirates, and to do that, he's going to have to defeat people like this. And so the dream is not within his grasp, not yet. He's going to have to get stronger to be able to achieve that, as will the crew. And we cut back to the rest of the crew. Zoro is very worried, and Sanji sees right through him, and he says, I can tell you're worried that Luffy might lose. They kind of tussle a little bit, but Vivi just says, don't worry, Luffy will be fine. He promised me that he'll meet me in Alubarna. And they just say, just focus on the rebellion and all this stuff. No use worrying about all of that. But it's a nice little moment for all of them involved, and a nice continuation of the Sanji-Zoro dynamic. They do seem to understand each other on a bit of a unique level, and Sanji sees through Zoro right there, and I think that's very telling. Usopp is telling his tall tales throughout this whole journey on this crab, my king. And in the meantime, Toto finds more water in a hole that he's digging and just says, Yuba is still alive. And I think that's a signifier and symbolism of hope, that hope that he's consistently held on to, that dream bearing fruit. You know, Toto in some ways is a parallel with a lot of the crew, and this is his improbable dream, holding on to that loyalty and hope for the king. He's a bit of a kindred spirit with the crew in that way, that improbable dream. A bit different, but still I think the sentiment is similar. And I think a lot of that is why his ability to hold on to this improbable dream is a lot of why Luffy connects with and respects him. But so yeah, him finding water here seems symbolic of Luffy's survival and of there being hope no matter how dire things seem here. Sir Crocodile tells Luffy Yuba will die. The sandstorm will destroy it, the rebels will get more mad, more riled up, and they'll destroy the royal capital. Both sides will eat each other alive. They'll rip the kingdom apart due to their compassion. Deeply tragic. Their hearts are in the right place, they're fighting for their home, but those who are evil will use that to their advantage. And so that's the duality or the double-sided nature of that heart. It can lead you down roads like this as well if you're blinded in some way. And I think what Sir Crocodile is also saying to Luffy here is he could have, it was his downfall as well, assuming that he's going to die. If he didn't act so impulsively and compassionately in response to being provoked, maybe he could have lived longer, who knows. But Luffy is still alive, and he's soaking wet, and he touches Sir Crocodile's hand. Sir Crocodile tosses him aside, leaves him bloody, dying in the dirt. And then we cut away from that, and Smoker tells Tashigi, back with them, that he's going to go out to sea to gather these reinforcements. But he says that Tashigi is now in charge, and she asks him, what do I do? And he says, follow your own sense of justice, and he'll take responsibility for whatever she does. He's so cool. He's so great. He's such a mentor in certain ways, and so heartfelt, and such an advocate of following your heart, and having confidence in yourself, which Tashigi could use. And he then says, pay close attention to what happens in this country. If it survives or if it falls, either way, pay attention, because history will be made. And he looks away. And that makes me think, does he have a preoccupation with history? Am I looking too much into that, or is there more? Does that indicate something about his character being involved with the turning tides of eras in history? He definitely was preoccupied with witnessing a historic event with Luffy. He felt the tides of history shifting when he saw Luffy smiling upon his supposed death, so he seems to have some sort of a preoccupation with it, and he seems to show this here as well as he tells this to Tashigi. And Tashigi decides she will take her troops to go after Luffy and the crew. So it's all coming together. The rebels are heading to Alubarna, the royals are ready to defend Alubarna, the Straw Hats are on their way to Alubarna on the crab, Luffy is dying, but he'll be okay, I'm sure. All the civilians are told to evacuate as Shaka takes charge, reluctantly against King Cobra's wishes, and we see where Cobra is finally. He's captured by Miss Merry Christmas and Mr. Four, and he thinks to himself, begging the two sides not to destroy each other, alluding to what he was thinking about before. We cannot fight our people. Both are part of this country and both are a part of the same sides, and there's this beautiful narration here. Let me just read it. Those who lament war, and we see Toto and Cobra, two people who lament war. Those who fight, and we see Shaka and Koza, two sides fighting each other. Those who incite war, we see Sir Crocodile grinning with his cigar. And those who, knowing the truth, want to stop it. And we see the crew, headed by Vivi, my queen, and we see Tashigi as well. Their hopes are about to collide at Alabasta. So the Navy, the Straw Hats, Baroque Works, the Rebels, the Royal Army are all going to clash there. It's so hype, there's such immense build-up here. I can't wait. It's so exciting. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to happen at Alabasta. And then Luffy wakes up yelling meat. But yeah, that is part 1 of Alabasta. It was an awesome first half or so. Like I said, very strong. A hugely strong fundamental basis. Definitely potential to be the best arc if the payoff ends up being really good. Tons of awesome character work, whether it be through existing ones like Vivi or Smoker or Luffy or Sanji or Sir Crocodile, interesting bits with Robin, really good ideas about politics and idealism and heart and leaders and potential blurred lines of morality. We'll see if that ends up being a factor. The stakes or the scope, the disparity between the difference of what Luffy's taking on. Lots of different ways in which that impossible dream is portrayed in a new context. And the tragedy and volatility of being compassionate and heartfelt as people are misled due to Sir Crocodile's plan. As these people who should be on the same side fight each other, or are about to fight each other. Ideas of leadership, compassion, futility, bonds, camaraderie, found family. Sir Crocodile's a great obstacle for Luffy. So many moving pieces all over the place, so many different themes, and I can't wait to see how it all concludes. It feels great. It feels grand. Alabasta, the world building here, it's been good up until now, but in terms of a singular arc, it's definitely the best here than it's ever been. Tons of details, tons of mythos and history and layers. But I don't have character rankings for this one because I'd rather do that when the arc is complete, but I will say that Vivi made a huge jump, Sir Crocodile made a huge jump, Robin's more interesting, Smoker's gotten way more interesting as well, Koza's great, Toto's a really good minor character as well, I love what he represents, nice Sanji stuff. So yeah, lots of great little character bits. And that's about all I have to say about this. I hope you enjoyed this very long talk about part 1 of Alabasta. I wonder if the next part will be the last one. We'll see. Either way, thank you once again. If you would like early access to part 2 of my Alabasta review, you can watch it right now if you become a patron. If you want to involve yourself in the streams, you can do so by following me on Twitch, where we stream them every Sunday, some Fridays. You can check out the Discord server in the description and pinned comment if you'd like to discuss these reviews or One Piece in general or other anime, other video games, whatever. And if you would like your comment to be highlighted in the next video or one of the future videos, just use the hashtag AJPiece. Thanks very much. It's been a great start, and I can't wait to see what it develops into. Tons of potential. Much appreciated. Many thanks for watching.